This boy was born into a family of legendary warriors, where he had everything to live a perfect life, but his life turned into hell. His own dad hated him, his mom died giving birth to him, and your uncle wanted to wipe out your entire bloodline. The only one who actually cared for him was his older brother. He trained the boy, protected him from bandits, even ate a worm in his place when they got kidnapped. He acted like a real brother. Since this boy seems born to suffer, his brother had to leave for his own good. Trust me, when you find out the reason, I doubt you guys won't get emotional. There was a day he took several whips from the bandits in the city, and even then he kept holding onto that sword. The only thing left from his family was that sword, which was also the last thing his brother left him to remember him by. That's why he protected the weapon with his life. After that day, he decided to never bow his head to anyone again. He started training hard, pushing himself to the max to one day become the greatest legendary warrior in history. Now let's go back and see how it all began. His name is Boris Jinneman, the second son of Jurchen Jinneman, Lord of Travich's Longard. The story jumps back 12 years to the Jinneman home, where the family welcomes him, but his mother died giving birth to him. Someone says it's tragic that he'll grow up without her. Still, they remind him what kind of family he was born into. The Jinnemans are famous warriors, so they expect him to grow into one too. One day, he and his older brother Yevgen Jinneman will inherit the family treasures, the armor Snowguard and the sword Winterer. They also whisper that the lady of the house is gone, and the master may hate second sons, but young master Yevgen Jinneman is kind, so he'll likely care for Boris. He is told to focus on staying alive, because people in Travich's are dying in the revolution. His uncle was cast out of the family and is now trying to start a revolution of his own. Because of that, they could all be killed. Even so, someone in the family will survive, and the Jinmans will take revenge. They never forget. Not the love they receive, not kindness, and never any wrong done to them. Later, an older Yevgen tells Boris he has to survive until the very end of the world. He is older too, and says he chose to trust him. With the prologue over, the story returns to the house of Jinman. A maid warns Boris that something evil lives near Lake Amira and begs him to remember her words. No matter what, he must never go there. Something wicked waits at that lake, especially on stormy nights like this one. They say a red-eyed monster waits there for anyone who comes close. That's why he must stay away from Lake Amira. Yevgen Jinneman asks if that's really what the maid told him. Boris says yes, and everyone else says the same thing. No matter what happens, stay away from that lake, because a red-eyed wraith lives there. Yevgen cups his cheek and tells him not to worry about things like that. Boris lights up, and Yevgen smiles warmly, promising he'll always be there for him. He says Yevgen's smile seems brighter than usual, though somehow it feels a little strange. He still smiles back and says okay. Yevgen ruffles his hair, joking that it looks like a bird's nest, and the birds need to fly out. Then he taps him with a wooden sword and says it's time for the practice he promised. Boris's hand shakes as he picks up the sword. He rushes in, but Yevgen easily dodges and tells him not to swing from too far away. He needs to be in range first. Their wooden swords meet, and Yevgen tells him his form isn't bad. Boris is clearly happy to hear it. Then he says he'll come at him for real this time, so Yevgen better get ready. He charges again, and Yevgen acts like he lost, falling back while grabbing him. He asks why he fell. Laughing, Yevgen says he pushed him over. Their father Jerkin watches from the window. Someone nearby comments that Yevgen really dotes on his little brother. Jerkin clicks his tongue and says that's pathetic for the family heir. This isn't the time to fool around. Then coughing breaks out in the room, and Jerkin turns an alarm. Outside, Yevgen tells Boris to try again. He wonders about the uneasy feeling in his chest, but Yevgen keeps teaching him and tells him to grip the sword tight. When he attacks again, Yevgen is surprised by how much he's improved and blocks the blow, praising him. But then Yevgen loses control of his sword and tries to warn Boris that he's too close. The wooden sword slams into his head, and he drops to the ground. Yevgen panics and keeps apologizing, swearing it won't happen again. He says he felt a sudden fear, like someone was trying to kill him, and then he starts to pass out. A man runs up and tells them not to return to the estate. Yevgen asks what happened. Out of breath, the man says that Vlado Jinman, the elder, has come back. Both he and Yevgen feel a chill. He realizes that strange feeling he had was real. He can't control it, but it always comes when something bad is about to happen. Back at the estate, a man gets off his horse and says hardly any time has passed, yet the dogs already forgot their master. He looks down at one and calls it a fool. Then it cuts to Jerkin in his office. His attendant calls to him and asks if they should let the visitor in. Jerkin lowers his gaze and reluctantly says yes. The door opens and Vlado Jinneman walks in, saying it's been a while. He's Jerkin's younger brother. Jerkin says it's been 5 years since he cast him out, and he's surprised Vlado is still alive. Vlado asks if he's upset to see him, and smirks. Jerkin says he doesn't know why he's here, unless he came to die. Vlado asks if seeing him is really that disappointing. Then Jerkin wonders why he bothered coming all this way. Vlado says nothing here has changed, it's all just older now. He tells Jerkin to offer him a drink, since he rode here in half a day to talk. Drinks are set down. Vlado takes a seat. After a sip, he asks Jurkin if he remembers their childhood, how they used to spar in the fields. He still remembers the sound of their swords colliding. Back then they skipped training and messed around, but their father always scolded Jurkin for failing to act like the eldest son should. Vlado could tell that got under his skin. Jurkin cuts him off and asks what he wants. Vlado says he's still impatient, then slams down his cup and gets to the point. He says Prince Elector Katya is backing him, and when Prince Elector becomes Chief Elector, Jurkin will be a problem. That's why he came back to make sure his side of the family survives. Jurkin turns away and says if that's all he's here to say, then stop wasting his time. Vlado sighs and reminds him the mansion isn't Jurkin's alone. Their parents left it to both of them. Jurkin clenches his teeth in anger and asks if Vlado forgot what he did, that their sister died because of him. He asks if he's already forgotten, Yenichka Jinaman. Vlado laughs and tells him to think carefully, then turns serious and asks how that was his fault. Jurkin says that if not for Vlado's filthy scheme, she and her fiancé would still be alive. Vlado sighs and says the one who drove Yeni Jaman to that end wasn't him, it was Jurkin. Jurkin hurls his cup at him and demands to know how he can say something so absurd to his face. Vlado wipes the drink from his face and says Jurkin is still awful, even after all this time. Then he says everyone in this family is stubborn and asks if Jurkin really thinks his sons will turn out any different. Jurkin shouts at him to get out. Vlado straightens up and says Jurkin should remember this. It's his last chance. Because they're brothers, he came willing to forgive everything, and Prince Elector will overlook it too. Grinning, he says Jurkin only needs to hand over the winter bottom kit. Jurkin instantly draws his blade and points it at Vlado, ordering him out. He says even if he dies, Vlado will get nothing from him. Vlado scoffs and says Jurkin is just as foolish as he thought. Then he warns he'll take everything and see how long Jurkin can hold on. We also learn the attendant's name is Tulk. Jurkin tells Tulk to begin the preparations. Later, Yevguenin asks where his father is. The man who warned them earlier says he's on the second floor. Yevguenin asks if Tulk is already downstairs. The man says yes. Yevguenin opens the door and says it's time to use the winter bottom kit. Boris is shocked. We're told the winter bottom kit is armor taken after the killing of another country's territorial lord and 99 enemies. As mentioned before, it's Snowguard and the sword Winterer. They are treasures of the Jaman family, passed down through the generations, and only the strongest can wield them. Over time, they became little more than rumor, but now they're being placed in Yevgeman's hands. He draws Winterer and Boris stares in surprise. Jurkin tells Yevgeman he has something to show him. In a flashback to earlier that year, Jurkin says Yevgeman has surely heard of the family treasure their great-grandfather and his son won after war. Winterer and Snowguard, together called the Winter Bottom Kit. Yevgenin says he thought it was just a rumor, and Jurkin says that was on purpose. Their grandfather gave one piece to Vlado Jeminin and one to him, hoping the brothers would work together, but he was wrong. The Winter Bottom Kit only shows its true power when both pieces are used together. Jurkin says Yevgenin turns 20 this year, so he must learn what it means to be heir to the Jeminin family. If danger comes, he must flee with the kit. Yevgenin is stunned. Jurkin tells him that no matter what happens, he must survive and keep the family treasure safe. The family's future depends on him. No matter what happens, he can't lose it. Jurkin asks if Yevgenin understands. Back in the present, the two are lying on the bed. Boris says it looks amazing, and Yevgenin asks which one he likes more. He says the armor looks too heavy, so the sword is cooler. Yevgenin tells him he can have the Winterer. Then, he says he'll give it to him once he's old enough to use it, then lets him try holding it, but the sword drops right away. It's still far too heavy for Boris. Yevgenin laughs it off and says he'll get there next time. As he helps lift it, he tells him that the Winterer is his sword. After that, Yevgenin kept telling him, whenever he could, that the sword belonged to him. Because of that, he slowly started to believe it really was his. But compared to his older brother, he's still just a child. The sword should really belong to Yevgenin. Yevgenin tells him their uncle has started a rebellion, and their father already knew this might happen, so now they have to follow the plan. He tells Boris not to be afraid. That makes him remember something Tulk once told him about family rebellions. In a fight like this, there are only winners and losers. No right or wrong. Even if many die, no one gets punished. No one will even admit what happened, or mourn the dead. As a member of the trebuchets, Boris would understand that when the time came, those words keep echoing in his mind, while Yevgenin picks up the sword and says he'll borrow it for now. He can see he is lost in thought. He grabs the bedsheet tight and says Yevgenin doesn't need to give it back. Father handed him the sword himself, so he has to survive and take revenge. Yevgenin just stares at him for a moment, then places a hand on his shoulder. He says the Winterer is Boris's, and he won't take it without permission. Once the rebellion ends, he'll return it. He lowers his eyes, saying he can't even hold it. Yevgenin reminds him, they held it together before. It's heavy now, but one day he'll be strong enough to use it. Then he hugs him and says he can do it. He's a warrior, just like his name means. So Boris's name probably means warrior in their language. Then something sounds outside. They check the window and see flames. Yevgenin says it's begun, and both of them go stiff. Outside, soldiers shout that today the head of the Jinnaman family will be replaced. They order everyone to throw down their weapons, surrender, and serve the new master to restore the family. Jurkin stays calm and says, anyone weak enough to be swayed by words has already left. It's not like the old days when their father led them, but loyal soldiers still remain. Jurkin opens the window and shouts that anyone who invaded Longard is about to face judgment. The soldiers below spot him and call out that he's on the terrace. Jurkin dares them to stop hiding like cowards, then tells Tolka to prepare. Tolka raises his hand, and a magic circle forms. White flames spread across the field. The soldiers panic, screaming and asking what's happening. Jurkin's men lift their spears and swear they'll kill Vlado. Vlado's men start to panic at Tolka's magic, and Jurkin orders his side forward. He asks if they really think the Jinman family would fall to trash like them. Then a huge noise cuts through everything. Jurkin turns, and a chill runs down his spine, as a giant serpent-like monster rises from a magic circle. He recognizes it as a summon from the frozen realm, Craggle. Jurkin realizes how bad this is. Only 3 people in the trebuchets can summon Craggle. Then he spots Jungnalnul in the crowd, one of Khan's archmages. He can't believe Khan sent him to back Vlado. That means Vlado's position has to be secured right now. The workers in the mansion start fleeing in terror as Craggle appears. The beast starts tearing into the tower. Jurkin says saving the people comes first. The second squad can hold them off, so they need to retreat and make a new plan. Then he hears Yevgenin and turns to find Yevgenin with Boris. He orders Yevgenin to run alone while he keeps him with him. When Yevgenin protests, Jurkin asks how he expects to escape while protecting him too. Then he asks if Yevgenin has forgotten what he's supposed to protect. Full of regret, Yevgenin turns and runs. Boris is led the other way. Jurkin guides him along. He remembers what his father just said. Escaping with a child is impossible. He thinks he's only holding his father back. Yevgenin has to live and protect the treasure, because even if he survives, he can't protect the family the way Yevgenin can. Boris looks back sadly and says he has a bad feeling. Just like before, he feels something terrible is about to happen to Yevgenin. Craggle keeps smashing through the estate while soldiers fight and kill each other. Tolk reports that most people escaped, but the mansion is still being destroyed. A huge crash rings out, and Boris turns to see another section of the estate collapse. Fear hits him, but Jurkin is furious. He shouts that Vlado dared to destroy the mansion, and he'll never forgive his brother for this. He orders Tolk to check on the first and second squads. Tolk sweeps his hand out, sending mana through the air, and says they're in trouble now that the mansion can't be used as cover. Jurkin quickly changes plans, attack both side entrances, split the soldiers in 2, and hide in the bushes until he gives the order. Boris tries to ask about the monster, but Jurkin says it's fine as long as they stay away from the mansion. Then he tells him to stop crying. The creature can't fully touch the living world because half its body is still in the other one. He still looks uneasy, and Tolk brings his fingers together to whistle for the remaining soldiers. Soon, everyone is hidden in the bushes. Jurkin tells Boris to follow slowly, then pull back once the fighting starts. After that, he's to run. Does he understand? He asks where he should go. Jurkin pauses to think, then tells him to head to Lake Amira. He hesitates, saying he's heard about the evil wraith there. Jurkin snaps back, asking if he really believes some old maid's ghost story, and how he can call himself a man of the Gynaman family. Because of that rumor, nobody goes near the lake, which makes it the safest place around. He tells Boris to hide by the 3 black trunk trees, and he'll come for him after the battle. He says he understands, though he's still clearly scared. Then Tolk says it's time. Jurkin roars for everyone to attack the east entrance, and the soldiers charge. He turns to Boris and asks what he's waiting for, telling him this is his chance to get up and run. He steels himself and takes off, thinking the story must be fake and he just needs to do what his father said. The battle erupts, with soldiers slaughtering each other under Craggle's screams. Vlado smiles and calls them forward, saying he'll cut every last one down as he walks toward them. He lifts his sword and instantly kills 3 soldiers. Still smiling, he calls out for Jurkin, mocking how he branded him a criminal and drove him out while taking the family and inheritance for himself. And now, he says, Jurkin is hiding like a rat. One of his men suddenly shouts that he found Jurkin. Vlado turns at once, saying Jurkin isn't far. After all, today Darkblade's Hargrun will be replaced by the Silver-White Winterer. Vlado's forces close in around Jurkin, who's clearly exhausted. Even so, he mocks their nerve for invading his land this openly. He cuts down 1 soldier, leaving the man's head on the ground, and dares the rest to come closer. He says they'll pay for their reckless courage. But while Jurkin is talking, Vlado slips behind him and drives his blade into his back, whispering that he warned him this would happen. Then he yanks the sword back out. Jurkin screams that it's an ambush. Vlado laughs and says Jurkin isn't the man he used to be. Maybe old age finally caught up to him. Then Vlado stabs him through the stomach. Jurkin coughs up blood. Tolk rushes over, shouting for Jurkin. Vlado pulls out his blade and says he'll kill Tolk too. A spell suddenly fires off and black mist spreads, blinding everyone. The soldiers start swinging wildly in panic. Tolk stretches out a hand and forms a magic circle. A moment later, he's got hold of Jurkin. Vlado slashes at them, asking if Jurkin plans to run like a coward, and calling it shameful for a warrior. He goes in to finish them, but they teleport away, leaving Vlado furious. Looking at the blood Jurkin left behind, Vlado orders everyone to find them. Meanwhile, Boris is running through the forest, repeating to himself that he has to find the black trunk trees. After a while, he finally reaches them, completely out of breath. He tells himself his father will be here soon, so all he has to do is hide. He crouches beside the trees, panting hard. He says he just needs to wait. Then he hears a strange sound in the forest. Cold sweat runs down his face, as he wonders what it is. He starts trembling in fear, thinking it might be his father or the wraith. The sound suddenly stops. Boris looks around, confused, then hears it again right behind him. A red tentacle wraps around him and lifts him into the air. He turns and sees the evil spirit of the lake. Boris realizes his maid was right, and wonders if his father really didn't know this monster was here. Then he wonders why Jurkin sent him here at all. The creature thrusts toward his face and he shuts his eyes and screams that he doesn't want to die. He cries out for his father and Yevgenin. Then the monster is sliced apart by Yevgenin. Boris drops to the ground and gets soaked in blood. He can't tell it's Yevgenin. All he sees is a knight standing over him. Fear creeps in as the figure comes closer. Yevgenin stops in front of him and shouts, asking why Boris is here. He just stares, confused. Then Yevgenin suddenly pulls him into a hug. He asks again why him came here, warning that he could have died. Boris tries to explain that father told him to wait here. That catches Yevgenin off guard, and he asks why he's here too. Father told him he had to protect the Winterbottom kit. Yevgenin goes quiet, then admits he doesn't agree with father. To him, family matters more than treasure. A treasure means nothing if the whole family dies, and no one can guard it forever. Boris asks how he even found him, and Yevgenin smiles. Proudly, he says he's his brother, so he'll protect him wherever he goes. He starts to answer, but a bright light flares behind them. He turns, and Yevgen tells him to listen carefully. Uncle isn't the only enemy. Khan is helping him too. He's the one who brought Boris here, and gave Uncle those soldiers and mages. Khan wants the Snow Guard, Winterer and the family's help. For that, father has to die. Yevgenin says father already knew, which is why he made them escape. A portal opens behind them. Both of them turn, startled, then relax when Tolk and Jurkin step out. Yevgenin quickly asks what happened, and Tolk says it was Hargren. Khan must have handed it over. It's a powerful poison that healing can't stop, so Jurkin can't be cured. Tolk then asks why they haven't left yet. Boris hides behind Yevgenin, who starts to speak, but Tolk cuts in, saying it's fine and asking if they're safe. Yevgenin explains they saw a bright flash and thought it came from near the mansion. That makes Tolk realize something. He says it was the Eye of Quiriria, a spell for seeing far away. A great mage like Jongnal could spot even a needle in a haystack from half a day away. Since they saw the flash, their position is exposed. Alarmed, Yevgenin asks what they should do. Tolk says all they can do is hope luck stays with them. Jurkin weakly mutters that they have to move. He looks at Tolk, and the two share a glance. Tolk gives a small nod. Then he opens a portal and tells Yevgenin to go. Boris looks up, wondering what Yevgenin will choose. Tolk tells him that if he understands father's will, he needs to leave and protect the treasures. At the same time, horses race through the woods, as Vlado fumes that they came all the way to Lake Amira. He says everyone fears this place, because it's the cursed lake that took their only sister from them. A memory comes back, young Yenny and Vlado playing, with Jurkin watching nearby. She runs after Vlado through the field, both of them laughing. Vlado says the only person he truly cared about in that house was his sister, and Jurkin cared for her too. Even if the two brothers fought all the time, Yenny was the only one who treated them as equals. Then Vlado demands to know if Jurkin has lost his mind. How could he send her to a family like that? Jurkin answers that even if the match was from another faction, Yenny made the choice. All they can do is hope she finds happiness. Vlado snaps, saying that's a joke. There's only one way to stop this. So he tells Yenny that her fiancé is going to Lake Amira. Shaken, she asks why, then runs off, crying that he can't go there. Vlado thinks his plan is working, and expects her to head to the lake. His men were supposed to kidnap her there, because he never meant to let her leave, but the plan goes wrong. A scream rings out, and something is clearly terribly wrong with her. She's lost her mind. Vlado watches in horror, wondering what happened. She was only supposed to be taken by his men. She should never have reached the lake. Jurkin shoves him aside. Vlado yells that they need a medic for Yenny, but Jurkin says she no longer belongs to this world. Even if he hated the engagement, Vlado still did something unforgivable. Vlado tries to explain that he never meant for this to happen. He says he didn't think a timid girl like Yenny would go to the lake, and he never believed the spirit was real. Jurkin says those excuses mean nothing to him anymore, then orders everyone back to the estate. Vlado asks what he's about to do, and Jurkin draws his sword. He says she's already gone. The evil spirit took her mind, and only death can free her. Vlado is restrained as he screams at Jurkin to stop, breaking down in tears. He cries out Yenny's name and then she dies. The memory ends, and Vlado orders everyone to search the lake from end to end. Then screeching rises from the water, and rotten hands start pulling themselves out. One by one, ghouls crawl onto shore. The soldiers panic, but Vlado demands to know if they're disobeying him. He cuts through the ghouls, cursing the lake and its foul stench. He admits he's afraid, but if killing Jurkin means facing every monster in this lake, so be it. Tolk tells Yevgen it's time to go, and now they can hear the soldiers getting closer. He warns they'll be found soon. But Yevgen says he won't leave. He's staying to protect both Boris and his father. Tolk reminds him, Vlado is coming, and their worst moment is almost here. Yevgenin says the family heirloom exists for the worst times, and if father has what he needs, then so does he. He asks Boris if he understands. He remembers the day Yevgenin received the winter bottom, and says he doesn't want a world without his brother or father. With a sad smile, Yevgenin says maybe they should see it as a proud way to die together. Boris feels his heart drop, and Tolk tells him not to come out unless he sees Yevgenin die. Yevgenin says when his time comes to face Vlado, he won't run. He looks up and says he understands. Now he knows why his brother's eyes looked so strangely blue, and why his smile shone so brightly. A bad feeling hangs over everything, but they keep moving forward. Jurkin says they've finally arrived. He's completely out of breath, and says Yenny must still be somewhere here, taken by the evil spirit and lost forever. He stares at the lake in grief. Vlado asks if he's only now deciding to search for her. They left her behind without even a grave. If she sees him now, she won't be happy. He was the one who killed her. Jurkin says Vlado is still too stubborn to face what he did. Vlado draws his sword and asks if he's finally ready to beg. Jurkin rushes him, saying it's far too late for that. Vlado answers that this grudge ends tonight. They'll fight until the Wraith appears. Their blades crash together as Jurkin says he once saved Vlado's life. Is he really still blind to his own sins? He's the real reason Yenny had to die and become one of the lake's monsters. Vlado lifts his sword and asks if Jurkin is still blaming him for that. Jurkin blocks, but Vlado keeps going, saying Jurkin is the one who killed Yenny, not him, and now he wants to finish this here. They trade blows, both swearing to stay until the red-eyed spirit shows itself. Meanwhile, ghouls close in around Yevgenin and Boris. Yevgenin mutters about his aunt and vows he'll protect him from the Wraith. He, confused, asks if he didn't already kill it in the forest. But one look at Yevgenin's face tells him something is very wrong. Yevgenin's hands start trembling around the winter. Boris lowers his gaze and says father was right. The family heirloom is strongest when only one person uses it, so Yevgenin has to be the only one wearing both. He steels himself. He'll take the first hit, even from the evil spirit, if it means Yevgenin lives. Then an aura starts rising from Yevgenin's chest, and he shouts that the snow guard is reacting. Yevgenin goes still, and says it's here. A red light appears. Suddenly, Boris is thrown into a white space, and he screams, asking what's happening, as he calls for Yevgenin. Instead, a cruel laugh sounds behind him. He turns slowly as a voice calls him a beautiful child, and two giant red eyes stare back. He jerks awake and sits up, asking where he is. Yevgenin calls to him, and Boris turns to see him waving. Yevgenin says he's glad he is awake, and tells him to drink some water. He just stares at him, confused. Yevgenin asks what's wrong. Was it a nightmare? Boris suddenly leaps up and hugs him, knocking the water away. He starts crying as they both tumble to the floor. Yevgenin holds him, and reminds him that he's his brother. He says something feels off. He was definitely at the lake. Father was fighting uncle while he and Yevgenin were surrounded. But after that, everything went blank. Yevgenin says maybe he should get more water. Boris asks where they are, and Yevgenin tells him they're north of there, in Gurim family territory. They got here on horseback while he was out cold. Once he wakes up, the first thing he asks is where their father went. Yevgenin Jeinman looks down and says their father went somewhere else. Everything fell apart after what happened, and they got separated. Boris asks how they're supposed to find him now, but Yevgenin Jeinman tells him not to. Tolk will reach out with magic when the time comes. He then asks what they're supposed to do until then. Yevgenin Junaman says they should go see their great-aunt. Her side isn't hostile to their father. Another option is heading toward Prince Elector Katya, the one their father serves. He thinks it over. Then he asks if they really need to go anywhere at all. Maybe they could just live like regular people. That catches Yevgenin Junaman off guard, and he admits they wouldn't even know how they've always had others taking care of them. Boris asks if they can simply wait for father to contact them and keep a low profile until then. Right after that, his stomach growls loud enough to answer for him. Yevgenin Jinaman actually smiles and laughs, then says they should get food at a nearby village. When they enter the inn, the keeper greets them. Yevgenin Jinaman asks for a single room. The innkeeper notices his sword and can tell it isn't cheap. With a sly grin she names the price, 10 elso. Yevgenin Jinaman drops a coin on the counter. That makes her smirk even more. She says she knew he had money, and points out he paid far too much. Around them, the patrons start joking that the boys must have come just to see how commoners live. She gives him the room key and asks what they want for dinner and breakfast. Yevgenin Jinman says anything is fine. Boris suddenly feels something bad behind him and turns. Yevgen Jinman taps his shoulder and tells him to keep moving. The mockery gets louder. People jeer that boys like them probably couldn't stomach commoner food anyway. The whole room bursts into laughter. Then one man walks over and sets a dish on their table. He tells them to try it and say how it tastes. Boris clamps a hand over his mouth, trying not to throw up. The bowl is full of maggots. He lets out a scream. He drops to the floor while the others mock him, asking if he won't eat the local special. One of the men, Gwit, gets up and says, maybe the boys just don't know how to eat it. He'd be happy to teach them. Gwit puts a hand on Yevgen Jinman's shoulder and offers his help. Yevgen Jinman knocks the hand away. He tells the man to go ahead if it's so good he can eat it first. Gwit laughs and calls everyone to listen. Then he says he isn't hungry enough to eat someone else's meal. Yevgen Jinman slams his head onto the table and tells him not to hesitate if it's really such a delicacy. He says he's even inviting him to share the table. Gwit starts shouting for him to stop, asking if he's seriously trying to force-feed him. Yevgen Jinman lifts a spoonful of maggots and everyone realizes he means it. Boris stares in shock and cries out his brother's name, terrified by the way he's acting. Yevgen Jinman lifts his head and looks at him. Then he releases Gwit. He says the man should be grateful. He's not cruel enough to do that in front of his little brother. Turning back to Boris, he says they'll eat later and it's time to leave. But Gwit's friends block them, asking where he thinks he's going. Yevgen Jinman turns and punches one of them in the face, dropping him to the floor. The man snarls that he'll teach him a lesson. Yevgen Jinman considers drawing his sword, then decides that would only make things worse. Instead, he grabs a chair and hurls it into one of the men. The others rush him at once. He blocks an attack, then hears Boris scream for them to let go. They've grabbed him. Gwit grins at Yevgen Jinman. A little later, both boys are tied up. Yevgen Jinman grits his teeth and calls them cowards. Gwit just laughs. He says this is Yevgen Jinman's fault for making a scene, and maybe now he'll learn some manners. Then he leans close to Boris and says he'll teach him instead. His men force his mouth open as a spoonful of maggots comes toward him. Yevgen Jinman shouts, asking what they think they're doing to a child. Gwit sneers that if he's so protective of his brother, maybe he'd rather eat it himself. Yevgen Jinman fires back at once. Fine, bring it to him. Gwit laughs at how stubborn rich kids are, then turns back and says there's no backing out now. Is he really sure? Because if he refuses, Boris is the one who'll have to eat it. Yevgen Jinman glares at him, then opens his mouth and eats the maggots. Gwit is stunned. The inn goes quiet for a beat. Then people start calling him a freak. Boris doesn't care about that. He's only worried about his brother. Yevgen Jinman lifts his head and swallows. Then he states his full name, Yevgen Jinman, Geinman, and declares that his father is the Lord of Longard. Gwit breaks into a cold sweat. Wiping his mouth, Yevgen Jinman says he now formally challenges him to a duel. The whole room stiffens as the patrons realize they really picked a fight with a noble. Yevgen Jinman orders Gwit to give his own name. At last they learn it. Gwit Falone. Yevgen Jinman says he's going to kill him, but he'll allow one chance to make up for this. If Gwit admits defeat and lies face down, he may be spared. Even then, he'll still have to eat the maggots. Boris is shocked. He's seen his brother use a sword before, but never in a real duel. Right now, Yevgen Jinman feels like someone else. Gwit Falone starts to wonder if the boy truly means to kill him. That fear only gets worse, as the other patrons start whispering about the sword. Gwit says he's heard of it before, and realizes the blade is the Winterer. Knowing his only shot is to strike first, he lunges at Yevgen Jinman. Yevgen Jinman blocks it easily. Gwit instantly knows he's outmatched. His own sword shakes from the impact, while Yevgen Jinman's blade doesn't move at all. Yevgen Jinman knocks him back. Gwit looks up in panic, and sees Yevgen Jinman already rushing in again. A downward slash comes at him. Gwit barely gets his sword up, and it's cut clean in half. He stares at the broken blade, while everyone else wonders how a sword could be split like that. Gwit collapses, muttering that it's impossible. Yevgen Jinman says it's over, and raises his sword to finish it. At that point, Gwit can think of nothing but fear. He drops to his knees and begs for his life. Yevgen Jinman asks if he's admitting defeat. Gwit says yes, he'll do whatever he's told, so Yevgen Jinman gives the order. Eat the bowl of maggots. Boris tries to stop this, but Yevgen Jinman says he won't repeat himself. Gwit slowly raises the spoon, then he puts it in his mouth. He coughs and fights back vomit, while forcing himself to eat. In the end, the bowl is empty. Boris has no words, but Yevgen Jinman tells him it's time to go. Back in their room, he sits there thinking, then finally calls to his brother. Yevgen Jinman asks if something is bothering him, but Boris stays quiet. Moving closer, Yevgen Jinman tells him he can say it. He finally admits he's relieved his brother is safe and glad he won. But during that fight, he truly felt like he was looking at a different person. He knows Yevgen Jinman didn't really have another choice. Still, something about it felt wrong. Yevgen Jinman says he saw clearly, no one knows him better than he does. Now he understands their father was right, and he says he can no longer afford sympathy. He reminds him that if he could, he'd stay by his side forever, but that won't happen. He will have to walk his own road. and to survive that road, he needs to grow stronger and tougher. To do that, he has to close himself off so others can't see what he really feels. He asks if Boris understands the world won't leave him alone. He asks if that means he's chosen to shut out everyone else. Looking away, Yevgen Njiminin says yes. He looks at his hand and thinks his brother is probably scared they'll grow weak, now that only the two of them are left. Yevgen Njiminin tells him to sleep, but keep his armor on. They don't know if someone might sneak in. He says he'll take the first watch so Boris can rest. After patting his head, he promises to wake him at midnight. Later that night, he is still awake. Yevgen Njiminin sits by the bed and Boris wonders if midnight has come yet. Then he freezes. Tears are running down his brother's face. He has never seen him cry before, so the sight feels unreal. He even wonders if he's dreaming, and starts tearing up too. He wants to comfort him, but no words come out. Instead, he turns away and pretends to sleep while crying quietly himself. He remembers Yevgen Njiminin saying he would shut himself off from the world. By morning, they set out again on horseback. Yevgen Njiminin leads from the front, while Boris rides behind. He keeps thinking about seeing his brother cry and feels like he should say something, so he points at a flower and asks what it's called. Yevgen Njiminin says it's a cornflower. Boris reminds him that he used to tell him stories about flowers and their history, then asks if he's forgotten all that. Yevgen Njiminin says maybe he has. By sunset, Yevgen Njiminin says they'll camp there for the night. They get a fire going, and he sits in uneasy silence. Suddenly, Yevgen Njiminin tells him to grab his blade. He turns aside and calls out to the people following them. If they came this far, they should stop hiding like cowards. With that many men, they shouldn't need to sneak around. A man steps out, laughing as he answers. A man sneers at their nerve and orders his men to circle them. Their horse bolts at once. Yevgen Njiminin says it looks like Gwit Falone has plenty of men guarding him. The man laughs and asks if he really thinks that's the reason. They're here for the winterer. He says it's too valuable to ignore. Yevgen Njiminin says he figured this might happen, but he still wanted a fair duel. Giving his name was the real mistake. The man snaps at his crew and tells them to stop waiting around and take the sword. They rush him together. Yevgen Njiminin doesn't budge. He catches their blows one after another and tells them this blade is far beyond their reach. Then he blasts several of them back. One man gets up and admits that was impressive, but says he wants to see him stop the next hit. He charges in. Boris shouts to Yevgen Njiminin to be careful, just as a chain whips in and wraps around the winterer. One of the attackers laughs, sure it's over now, that he can't draw out its power. Then he notices the sword starting to glow, as Yevgen Njiminin raises it high. Yevgen Njiminin grips the winterer tighter and swings, smashing the chain apart. Everyone throws up an arm to shield their eyes, shouting that the chains just blew up out of nowhere. Sideburns says it's an honor to finally see what people only whispered about the winterer's special move, Frozen Break. Cold energy pours off Yevgen Njiminin, and Sideburns says the sight of it makes him hungry for more. He praises Yevgen Njimin's skill, then says he doubts he'll stay so calm with a hole in his little brother's chest. Yevgen Njiminin is stunned that he got that close to Boris. He could handle these men alone, but he changes everything. He says 12 years isn't a short time. Sideburns and his men laugh, acting like the boy's lost his mind. Boris meets his eyes and says it means he knows when he has to die, and this isn't that moment. That answer irritates Sideburns, and he says it's time to test the legend. He lifts his axe. He braces himself. Yevgen Njiminin screams and lunges to shield him, but an arrow suddenly flies in and pierces the man's throat. The attacker drops before he can strike. Boris freezes as blood sprays out and the man collapses. The others panic, asking what just happened and where the arrow came from, but before they can react, they're cut down one-sidedly. Yevgen Njiminin pulls Boris close, unsure if these newcomers are more enemies. Then a voice says they held up pretty well, and 4 robed figures step forward. Yevgen Njiminin demands to know who they are. One answers that they're his saviors, so he should show a little gratitude. He says if they want nothing back, then he thanks them. They laugh and ask what he even has to give. Yevgen Njiminin can tell they're strong. They erase that whole group in seconds. He still can't tell if they're friends or threats. One says they may look like rich kids, but for now they should just enjoy the fire. Yevgen Njiminin pauses, then thanks them again for the help. They introduce themselves. One is Wilskempf, another Joaquin, and the third is Romevets July. Their leader introduces herself as Joaquin Janaka Goth, but tells them to call her Nika. Yevgen Njiminin glances at Boris, unsure how much to reveal, and Romevets says she gets it. If they don't trust them yet, they can leave. Instead, Yevgen Njiminin and he both shake their heads and tell them they're welcome to stay and rest. A little later, they all settle around the fire until Boris starts nodding off. Nika tosses him an apple and tells him to take it. When he hesitates, she says not to worry, it isn't poisoned. Then she asks Yevgen Njiminin if he is his brother, since he looks awfully young. She explains they're wanderers, moving from place to place, job to job, and asks if he's ever heard of the mortal land. Yevgen Njiminin repeats the name, and Nika says it used to be called Ganopoli, the Magic Kingdom. It once sounded like a fairy tale, but war destroyed it. Now it's a ruined wasteland, crawling with spirits, and the undead. It's a place where people die and rise again as corpses. Yevgen Jiniman stays silent, and Nika asks if the story shocked him. She says his face gives away exactly what he's thinking. He tells her the hard part to believe is that she escaped from there. Ganapoli isn't somewhere people simply walk in and out of. Rumavats tells him to look at the tip of his bolt, coated in a strange liquid. He says it's a deadly poison, strong enough to kill even a ghost. Nika cuts him off, saying it's not like they've seen the real Ganapoli. They only wandered the edges and brought back things the ghosts had been wearing. She pulls out a bracelet and asks if he wants to see something interesting. Marks are carved along its side. She tosses it to Boris, who stares at it in awe. He says the pictures show people dancing, and the art is beautiful. He's never seen that city, but somehow it feels like it's right in front of him. He can almost imagine the dust glittering in the sun, the tall pillars rising high, and rooftops lined with rubies. He says it's amazing how much he can feel from just one bracelet. Later, they head to an inn. The innkeeper says he was wondering who'd show up so early, and remarks that Nika looks exhausted. She says they ran into trouble and couldn't sleep outside, so they pushed through the whole night. Yevgen Jiniman adds that he followed because he didn't want to sleep beside corpses. Nika tosses him a set of keys and tells him to get some rest. Caught off guard by the kindness, he thanks her. Wilskempf and Joaquin also tell them good night. Boris says he's completely wiped out. Yevgen Jiniman tells him they can finally sleep easy because no one should be after them now. Then he slips into a dream, back to when he was a child playing with a horse. Someone calls to him and he turns to see Vlado Jiniman, though he doesn't know who he is. The man introduces himself and asks if he's all alone. Then Vlado Jiniman puts on a friendly act and says he can show him what real fun is before lifting Boris up, which makes the boy light up. While he enjoys it, Vlado Jiniman smiles and says he'll never forget this. He's already wondering what kind of face his father will make. Then he turns and walks toward a well. Terrified, Boris calls out as he sees Vlado Jiniman laughing. He begs him to let go and says he's scared, but Vlado Jiniman only laughs harder and drops him. He wakes up on the floor with his hands tied behind his back. Yevgen Jiniman says he's glad Boris is awake. He looks around and asks where they are. Well, Yevgen Jiniman says they need to get out fast, and the winterer is gone. He asks how that happened and who could have taken it. Yevgen Jiniman lets out a bitter laugh, and Boris asks what's wrong, but he keeps going, saying they're in a strange mess. He knows he is still a kid who doesn't understand the world yet. Still, he hopes he won't grow up to be like him. What their father should have taught him, he'll start teaching now, and the first lesson is paying people back twice over. A thud sounds outside the room as the innkeeper is shoved to the floor, and a dagger slips from his hand. Yevgen Jiniman says he doesn't have time for games and asks one last time who locked them up. He glares at the man. Panicking, the innkeeper says he never wanted any part of this, and they told him Yevgen Jiniman couldn't fight. Yevgen Jiniman picks up the dagger, while the man says he wishes they hadn't held something over him. Holding the blade up, Yevgen Jiniman asks who did it. The innkeeper folds instantly and blurts out that it was Nika. Yevgen Jiniman is hit hard by the betrayal, and mumbles under his breath. The innkeeper explains that Nika's group sold them to the Lekkertable Mercenary Corps, who buy people and work them as mercenaries until they've squeezed out their value. He warns they'll come soon. Yevgen Jiniman asks where Nika's group is now. The innkeeper sighs and says they're at Helmer's Tavern, and they'll leave tonight. Yevgen Jiniman turns to Boris and says there's still time, they need to move now. That night they peer through a window, and he tells him to hide and watch carefully. Yevgen Jiniman heads for the door, saying Boris needs to see this so he'll understand. He wishes he could keep him kind and innocent, but they don't have that choice. He opens the door and finds Joaquin and Wilskempf inside. He wonders where the other two are, but walks in anyway and takes a plate from the wall. As he approaches, his hand moves to his dagger, and he asks if someone called for him. Wilskempf asks Joaquin if he ordered more drinks, but Joaquin says no, they're already done drinking. Yevgen Jiniman tells them a lady is waiting outside. Wilskempf says that's odd, since Nika went to meet the merchants. Joaquin agrees it's strange, and then they look up into Yevgen Jiniman's icy stare. Both of them panic. Joaquin starts to yell, but Yevgen Jiniman strikes his neck and drives his hand into the table. Joaquin screams in pain, and Wilskempf draws his sword, demanding to know who he is. Yevgen Jiniman grabs Joaquin's sword and asks if Wilskempf is sober enough to answer. He's here for his blade, he says. So where is it? He slips past Wilskempf's strike and reminds him to answer the question. He tightens his grip on the sword and swings at Wilskempf, who barely blocks it. The impact rattles Wilskempf so hard he flinches, and Yevgen Jiniman instantly puts the blade to his throat. He says being a thief was bad enough, but being shameless makes it worse, and if Wilskempf doesn't talk, he'll lose his hands. But he makes it simple: talk or die. Yevgen Jiniman kicks the table, making Joaquin jerk in fear and cry out, so he blurts out that Nika has the blade. She and Romevats plan to sell it and split the cash. Will snaps, calls him a traitor, and warns that Nika won't forgive this, then knocks Yevgen Jiniman's sword aside and bolts, shouting that Nika and the black gloves will come after him. Joaquin yells for him to tell Nika the deal is off, then starts whining that he knew this would happen. He says he never should have trusted her dirty plan. According to him, she said she was going to bargain over the sword, but that was probably a lie. She meant to keep it herself. Rome Vats mainly fights with a crossbow, so he probably pushed for selling the sword and sharing the profit. He adds that if Yevgenin Gentleman heads to the north gate, he'll find the group Nika is meeting, and if they spot him there, they'll gladly hand him over to the mercenaries. He also warns him to watch out. Nika is dangerous. Yevgenin Gentleman says he'll regret it forever if he doesn't get the Winterer back, then yanks the dagger from Joaquin's hand. He tells him to get out of sight. He never wants to see him again. Then they head back out, and Yevgenin Gentleman goes quiet, deep in thought. Boris asks what he's thinking. After a pause, Yevgenin Gentleman tells him that this is bitter, and things will only get harder from here. He shows him his bloody hands and says even he can do this. It's not just their father, he can kill people too. Boris says that's not who his brother really is, and he knows he's only doing this because of him, because he wants to protect him. Yevgenin Gentleman answers that when you have someone to protect, you'll do anything for them, even kill. Then he tells Boris to value himself too. Just like he can do anything for him, he should also fight for himself. He needs to protect and cherish himself more than any treasure, even the Winterer or anything else, so he won't die, be left behind, get hurt, or fall sick. Surviving is his most important job, and he has to make it to the very end. The scene shifts to Nika meeting someone, and Yevgenin Gentleman notices the Winterer isn't in sight. He also thought Wills would be here by now. Boris tells him to look over there and points at a group. Yevgenin Gentleman studies them and says they must be the Lechable mercenaries, the infamous fighters he's heard about. Their leader is introduced as Daraki. Nika greets him politely, but Daraki cuts her off at once. The people she sold them escaped, so she owes compensation. Nika fires back that he arrived late. She did her part like always. Daraki keeps it blunt, pay double or come work for them. Nika shouts that it's a ripoff, but Rome Votes tries to calm her down. He says paying for the loss is only fair, and they've worked together before. He also argues that joining them would only ruin their teamwork, so giving back the money makes more sense. Nika calls them cheap and tosses the money back. Daraki says that's still not enough. If they won't pay more or work it off, he'll kill them. Nika and Rome Votes tense up. Then she asks one thing. Does he plan to keep them working for life? Rome Votes whispers, asking if she's trying to turn them into slaves. She says no, then asks Daraki to confirm they won't serve forever. He says he'll let them go if they perform well on the first job, then starts going on about the mission. Nika lowers her hood and reveals the Winterer, saying she doesn't know the full job yet, but whatever it is, she has to do it well. Yevgen Gentleman finally sees the blade, while Nika says they better not back out now. Yevgen Gentleman suddenly shouts for them to stop, and they spot him on the roof before he jumps down. Daraki is surprised, and Nika can't believe he came back instead of running. Landing in front of them, Yevgen Gentleman demands his sword back and calls Nika by her full name. He repeats himself. Give back his blade. Rome Vots can't figure out why he's here, but one look tells him Yevgen Gentleman isn't joking. Nika laughs, saying the man Daraki wanted has shown up on his own. Then she asks if that means they can leave now. Yevgen Gentleman asks by what right they're buying and selling people in a country that doesn't allow slavery. Mika laughs at him, saying he should have obeyed quietly, and he has no right to preach to anyone. If he wants to whine like a child, he can do it at home with his mother. Boris shouts back that she's a coward for attacking them in their sleep. Is that what her so-called talent looks like? And is she actually proud of it? Then he starts remembering the apple and the bracelet, and tears well up as he calls her a coward again. He says they used his trust against him. They're not warriors, just con artists. That catches both of them off guard, and Daraki says it sounds like the sides tell different stories. He asks what Boris means. Are these really the two people he bought? Daraki decides to settle it. Simply, they'll fight, and he'll release the winner. The loser gets dragged away by his men. Yevgen Gentleman raises his sword at Nika, telling her to draw hers. Her hand reaches for the Winterer first, but she realizes Daraki would take it if she used it, so she switches to her regular sword instead. She tells him not to hate her too much when she sells his body. Then she rushes in with a fast strike, and Yevgen Gentleman barely slips past it. Right away he realizes how fast she is. She pulls back, looking completely sure of herself, mocking him for talking big without the skill to match. Her blade starts flashing across his body from all angles, driving him back bit by bit. Small cuts begin to cover him, though he still manages to block some of her swings. Boris watches, terrified for his brother. He can tell Nika is strong, and Yevgen Gentleman is getting hurt. The Winterer matters, but his brother's life matters more. Then he glances up and notices someone hidden in a tree, wondering who it is, but he quickly turns back when Nika suddenly yells. A burst of blood follows as Yevgen Gentleman is stabbed in the chest, and Boris screams for him. But Yevgen Gentleman's eyes stay hard and focused. He lets his sword fall and drops toward Nika. He grabs onto her, leaving her confused, but it was only a trick to seize the Winterer. She demands to know what he's doing, just as an icy aura spreads through the area, and in seconds, Nika is frozen solid. Once she's completely covered in ice, everyone asks what he did, and then they notice his sword is glowing. Yevgen Junaman lifts the blade and declares the duel finished. He won. Duraki nods and says he'll honor the result. Boris runs straight to him and throws his arms around him. Romovats can't understand what just happened, but he readies his crossbow anyway, deciding that if it's come to this, he may as well fight. He aims it at them, and it's coated with the same deadly poison he showed them by the campfire. His eyes burn with hate, then 2 throwing knives slam into his arm and stop him cold. He cries out in pain and drops to his knees. Duraki asks how he dared pull that in front of him, then calls for Naya. A figure jumps down from the tree, knives in hand, a young girl. Duraki orders her to seize the loser. She lands cleanly, gives a short nod, and rushes Romovats. Shaken, he dodges her first strike and blocks the second with his crossbow, but on the third, she knocks the weapon from his hands and puts a knife to his throat. As the crossbow hits the ground, he stares down at her in total fear. Romovats demands to know why Duraki is siding with Yevgen Junaman after all their past deals, but Duraki ignores him and orders his men to clean this up. They drag Romovats away while he screams. Yevgen Junaman says they clearly don't think much of a mother's worth, and if Romovats's mother could see him now, she'd be ashamed of him. Naya glances toward Boris, and he says he felt her watching from the tree earlier. Then Yevgen Junaman calls him over saying it's time to leave, and they head out. As he looks back, Boris realizes Nika and her gang never once asked why they were running. They planned to cheat them from the start. Now their money is gone, their horse is gone, and he wonders how they'll keep going. Still, at least his brother is alive, and they got the Winterer back. While he's lost in those thoughts, he suddenly feels hands choking him and starts crying, gasping that he can't breathe as he calls for his brother. Yevgen Junaman looks down at him, and Boris shoves away in horror when he sees it's his own brother strangling him. Then he jolts awake, grabbing his throat and asking if it was only a dream. He looks over and sees Yevgen Junaman asleep on the floor. Boris wonders why he's lying so strangely, and leans over to check on him. Hearing the snoring, he says his brother must have just shifted in his sleep because he was tired. So Boris covers him up and lies down beside him, whispering good night. But Yevgen Junaman is drenched in cold sweat, and when he opens his eyes, he gasps at what he almost did. The next day they go into town and enter a shop, saying they want to sell a few things. Yevgen Junaman sets down an amulet and asks what he'll get for it. Then he corrects himself. It's a mirror. The shopkeeper says it's in good shape, but very old, so he offers 300. Yevgen Junaman thinks it over, then says that's too low. The shopkeeper sighs and asks if he's trying to rob him. If he doesn't like the price, he can sell it somewhere else, though he won't get more than 200 anywhere else. Maybe some noblewoman once used it, he says, but things like this aren't popular anymore. Boris tells him their mother's mirror means a lot, but Yevgen Junaman won't change his mind. In the end, he takes the 300 also. That catches him off guard. Later, at a restaurant, Yevgen Junaman tells him to eat, and Boris takes a bite, saying it actually looks good. Still, he can't believe he's eating this. His real brother would never have sold that mirror, not even for 3,000. To him, this meal was bought with their mother's keepsake. He says bread and water would have been enough, and wonders how long his brother will keep acting like this. Then he asks when their father will send word. Yevgen Junaman goes still, then awkwardly says it may take a while. He adds that their father is likely healing first, and will see them once he recovers. So for now, they should eat well and stay in good shape. While saying that, Boris notices his hands shaking as he cuts his food. That surprises him, but he agrees and says his brother is right. He starts to wonder if his brother doesn't want to see their father at all. His face looks so sad. That night, Boris has the same dream again. Yevgen Junaman choking him. He's sick of having it, so he opens his eyes and wonders why it keeps happening. As his vision clears, he slowly sees his brother really sitting on top of him, hands around his throat, and his brother's eyes are glowing faintly red. Yevgen Junaman lets out a breath and lifts Boris by the neck. He struggles to break free and kicks wildly, but Yevgen Junaman throws him, and he crashes into the wall. Boris looks up at his brother and calls to him, but Yevgen Junaman turns toward the Winterer. He suddenly jerks up and grabs his brother, asking if he was really trying to kill him. Crying now, he asks why this is happening, saying something is wrong and he needs to wake up. Then Boris truly wakes up, panting. Yevgen Junaman asks what happened. Was it another nightmare? He gives him a gentle smile, but Boris only sees the monster from his dreams. He's terrified. He quickly makes an excuse, though his back still hurts. Yevgen Junaman asks what's wrong and whether he's hurt. He starts remembering how his brother threw him into the wall, and his stomach drops. He says he just fell off the bed in his sleep. Yevgen Junaman laughs and says that hardly ever happens. He must have been exhausted. Since they rested so much yesterday, he says they should travel farther today. Once they set out and keep walking, Boris stares at his brother's back, asking himself what really happened. It couldn't have been only a dream. His pain is real. He also knows his brother wasn't in his right mind. His hands were burning hot, and he was sweating like he had a fever. Worse, he doesn't seem to remember any of it. Boris can't figure out what's happening to him, so he asks if he's okay. Yevgen Jinman looks pale and sick, but still says he's fine. A moment later, he starts to sway. That confirms it for him. His brother is sick, which makes sense after all this traveling without help. Now he wonders if they're really going to their aunt's estate, or if his brother can even make it there. A scary thought follows. Maybe soon he'll have no one left. Boris grips his tunic and asks if their father isn't coming after all. Yevgen Jinman turns and says that's not it, but he begs him to tell the truth. Pulling at his shirt, he asks if their uncle captured their father or not. Yevgen Jinman tells him to wait, then sits down, saying he needs a moment. Boris says it's strange. He clearly remembers the monster that appeared, and the one at the lake, but nothing after that. He keeps wondering what happened, what he saw at the lake, and what became of his father. A chill runs through him when Yevgen Jinman says he's right. Their father is not coming. A while ago he went somewhere he can never return from. Boris is hit with flashes of memory of his father's body on the ground. Yevgen Jinman tries to calm him, saying he's with Tolk, so he should be okay. He glances at Vlado Jinman, then hears Yevgen Jinman shouting for him to snap out of it. A hand rises from the lake, and a ghoul-like creature crawls out. But this one is different from the others. It stops right in front of Boris, freezing him in fear. His own eyes start turning red too. It's the red-eyed wraith. The thing stares straight at him, and Boris drops his blade and collapses in terror. He shuts his eyes, but Yevgen Jinman reaches for him and yanks him away from the wraith, telling him to run. Boris watches as his brother is flung through the air by the monster, his blood splashing all over him. That's when he realizes it's the lake wraith his nanny warned him about. It doesn't seem dead or alive, just empty eyes fixed on the world. The wraith struck Yevgen Jinman, and Boris ran without looking back, ashamed of how scared he was. Now he wonders what happened to Yevgen Jinman after that. While he was fleeing, the wraith attacked again, and Yevgen Jinman stood his ground to save him. The memory fades and they're back by the campfire. Yevgen Jinman still seems out of it, while Boris just stares into the fire. At last, Yevgen Jinman says that when he wakes tomorrow, he should leave and go on alone. He is stunned as Yevgen Jinman says they need to part ways. He can't stay with him, and he doesn't have much time left. Boris asks what he means, then realizes exactly what he's saying. But he is stubborn. He says no, he's staying with his brother until the very end. Yevgen Jinman warns that if he loses control again, he might really kill him next time. Just like the wraith of Lake Amara, the thing that killed Aunt Penny. He remembers how kind she used to be, but after she came back from the lake, that person was gone. He remembers it clearly. The sound from her mouth wasn't his aunt's voice. It was a monster's scream, a madness that only death could end, and soon that may be his fate too. Yevgen Jinman picks up his sword and tells him to hold the Winterer, then try to draw it and swing it. He asks if he means right now, but he does it anyway. The sword is far too heavy for him, drooping in his hands. Standing behind him, Yevgen Jinman says he expected that, and things would be easier if Boris were only a little older. It would be even better if he could stay alive until he was old enough to survive alone. Then he starts stepping away and says he can't grow overnight. Meanwhile, his own time is running out, and soon he'll only become a danger to him. Boris panics, not knowing what to do. He's scared his brother will leave at any second, and he can't stand being abandoned by the people he loves. Tears pouring out, he says he doesn't care if his brother kills him. He knows what Yevgen Jinman is thinking, but he probably can't survive well alone anyway, and so many people are after the winter. Some may be even stronger and crueler than anyone they've met, so he wants to stay, and would rather die by his brother's hand than someone else's. Yevgen Jinman grits his teeth and slaps him hard, but he just stands there crying. Yevgen Jinman asks if he already forgot what he told him before, then orders him to say it back. He lifts his hands to his face and wipes his tears, saying that his brother told him to survive. Yevgen Jinman says he must never talk about dying again. After he's gone, Boris has to become strong. No one will be there to protect him, and Yevgen Jinman won't be able to rest in peace otherwise. He tells him never to trust anyone or lower his guard again. It'll be hard, but it will matter, because if he does all that, he'll live long enough to see all the endless paths his life could still take. Then Yevgen Jinman bends down and picks up the Winterer, saying he wants Boris to have it too. He still desperately doesn't want his brother to go, but Yevgen Jinman says if he loses his mind again, he must stab him with it. He says his memories are breaking apart, and inside those missing pieces, he has no idea what he's been doing. He may already be going mad. Maybe he's been screaming like a beast, just like Aunt Penny did. Maybe he already threatened Boris. He thought it was morning, but when he came back to himself, it was already afternoon. By the time he made camp, the midnight star was already in the sky. Little by little, he feels himself turning into something that isn't him anymore. Even now, his eyes still carry that red glow. The truth is, Yevgen Jinman is terrified. He's terrified he'll hurt him and wake up to find his brother dead. That's something he could never live with. The next day, Boris comes back carrying an armful of small sticks for the fire. Yevgen Jinman sits against a tree, fighting to stay awake. He asks why he won't sleep a little when he hasn't rested in 3 days. Yevgen Jinman asks if it's really been that long, looking completely worn out. As Boris snaps twigs for the fire, Yevgen Giniman reaches out, holding his armor, and telling him to take the snow guard, since he won't need it anymore. He says it belongs to him. Yevgen Giniman answers, "What use is armor to a dead man?" Boris takes it at last, and Yevgen Giniman asks him to promise just one thing: never seek revenge. He says the nobles of Trave spent years tearing each other apart in faction fights. If either side had let go of its hatred first, this tragedy might never have happened. Uncle fought father, but the one who killed him was the crimson-eyed wraith. He just hopes he never gets dragged into the family's grudges. Instead, Boris should keep growing up and seeing new things. When that time comes, he wants him to forget what happened here, and choose forgiveness in the end. Maybe letting it all go is the best path left to him. That night, the fire burns while Yevgen Giniman stays awake, and he sleeps nearby. Then he jerks awake again, reminding himself he can't sleep, not even for a moment. He knows if he does, he might kill his brother. Soon he hears his parents calling him over, welcoming him into a warm summer field. Boris gently closes his eyes and tells him it's okay. He says he can finally sleep and rest. Yevgen Giniman opens his eyes again. He watches him for a moment, then Boris settles back into the rough bed. Yevgen Giniman shuts his eyes just for a minute, but a leaf lands on him and wakes him right back up. He looks up at the sky and realizes this isn't an ordinary night. Shooting stars streak everywhere, and he sits up to watch them. Then he rises, starting to form an idea for what he can still do for Boris. For the first time, the red in his eyes is gone. After that long, brutal day, we hear his thoughts. He hopes he is sleeping well. A shooting star leaves a trail behind before returning to its mother to rest. So he shouldn't be afraid, he should sleep peacefully, because his brother will protect him, and no one will wake him. Boris wakes and looks for him, but only finds a hole nearby. His stomach drops at once. As he walks closer, Yevgen Giniman's thoughts go on. Even if the night is frightening, morning will come soon. He must not cry. The world is hard, so he should sleep well. He says goodnight, and promises he'll always stay beside him. At the hole, he finds his brother dead, Winterer covered in blood. Yevgen Giniman chose to protect him by taking his own life. His final words say that if he has a happy dream, the long night will pass before he knows it. Yevgen Giniman looks strangely peaceful in death. We flash back to the moment Yevgen Giniman watched the shooting stars and found his answer for saving Boris. He looked at the grave he had dug, then checked him one last time to make sure he was sleeping soundly. After placing Winterer in the hole, he decides to do a few last things for him. He adds more wood and makes sure the fire will keep burning. Then he notices Boris isn't covered all the way, so he pulls the blanket over him. He briefly wakes and sees him heading toward the grave, then falls asleep again. With Winterer set in place, Yevgen Giniman stands before it and understands what he has to do. For a moment, it seems he hesitates. Then he smiles and accepts his fate, falling forward and driving himself onto the blade. Boris stares at his brother's body and realizes Yevgen Giniman even pulled Winterer back out and laid it beside himself. Then he drops to his knees. Looking at his brother's hands, he understands Yevgen dug his own grave with them. Crying, Boris realizes he threw himself onto Winterer, then used the last of his strength to pull it free. He can't stop asking why his brother did this, whether Yevgen Giniman had ever once asked anyone for help. He can't remember a single time. He places the snow guard on his brother's body, saying his brother never even got to live for himself. Yevgen Giniman died, believing this was the only way to escape the curse, and he accepts that. Then he starts burying him with his bare hands, just like his brother had done. He looks down and tells him goodnight. There was probably so much more he wanted to say, but he couldn't. He puts his leather armor back on, and picks up the sword. Then he leaves the grave, determined to survive as best he can. The story shifts to a city. A young girl complains, asking why she has to keep wearing these clothes. Her maid explains that out here in the countryside, clothes like hers have to be custom made. The girl snaps back that they should get them somewhere else, then asks why she has to dress like a maid at all. Her maid says any other place would tell them the same thing, and the girl storms off. She argues it wasn't her fault. Their chest of clothes fell from the carriage into the mud. They're in travels, not unmarried, so where is she supposed to find a dress? She looks around, sees no dressmaker, and thinks maybe a seamstress would do instead. Then nearby chatter catches her attention, and she spots Boris. People wonder why a boy that young is traveling alone in such rough shape, and why he's carrying such an out-of-place sword. The blade is clearly expensive, which makes him stand out even more. The maid says he looks about the same age as her lady, and can't believe he's carrying something so eye-catching. His tired eyes make her wonder what he's been through. When he heads for an inn, the girl thinks it seems suspicious and calls out for him to wait. She warns him not to rush into a place like that. There could be dangerous thugs inside, especially in an area this rough. Boris, his face empty, says he'll be fine. She can't get over how dark his expression is, like his whole face is covered in shadow. Without another word, he walks into the inn and calls to the bartender. She welcomes him. He asks for a room, and she checks if he's alone. When he says yes, she offers a cheap one for 5 silvers. She says it's small, and Boris glances that way. Then he says he needs one more thing. He asks if anyone would hire a child like him. He doesn't want money, just food and a place to sleep. All Boris wants is to follow Yevgen Gentleman's last wish. The innkeeper is surprised. Even though he's alone, he still seems like a sheltered kid, and she wonders what happened to leave him by himself. She says she can't promise anything yet, but some merchants might need an errand boy, and wealthy travelers may want servants too. A man at one of the tables raises his hand. As he asks for another beer, we learn the innkeeper is Tanya, and the man is Bunin, the blacksmith. Tanya tells him to wait a second, then explains to Boris that Bunin runs a smithy and needs an assistant, so he should talk to him. She also asks his name and introduces herself. After giving his name, he goes over to Bunin, who eyes his thin frame and asks if he really thinks he can handle blacksmith work. Boris admits he doesn't even know what the job involves, and Bunin laughs, saying at least the kid isn't a liar. He says he doesn't carry himself like a commoner, and asks what house he's from, and whether some noble trouble happened recently. Bunin says he's forged weapons for plenty of conflicts. Usually it's rich people killing each other to take what the other has. If Boris went through something like that, Bunin says it would explain the darkness in his face. After a short silence, he asks if he doesn't want to talk about it, but he says nothing. Bunin slams his mug down and says that's fine, it doesn't matter. If he shows up early tomorrow, he'll put him to work, and if he can't keep up, he'll throw him out. Tanya checks if they're done talking, says that's great, and tells him to be sure to thank him. Boris nods, and for the first time in a while, his expression softens a little. Later that day, Tanya comes to his room with a bowl of food, saying he probably hasn't eaten dinner yet. She tells him it's the inn's special soup, so he should eat it while it's hot. He looks down at the meal. Tanya tells him he needs to stop hiding his thanks when he really means it. Caught off guard, he quickly thanks her. Smiling, she says he's welcome, and tells him to eat well and get some rest before leaving. Boris finishes the whole bowl, then he lies down with Winterer beside him. He thinks blacksmith work will be exhausting, since they make farm tools and weapons. He also has to meet Bunin tomorrow, but that part doesn't worry him. What really worries him is whether he can trust these two. Even after people he trusted turned on him in a crisis. After Nika saved him, then tried to steal the sword and sell them to mercenaries. Boris can't help thinking these two might be plotting too. To him, the nicer someone acts, the uglier their real plan might be. So he decides to check for himself, see if the smithy is real, and whether the blacksmith can be trusted. When he steps outside, riders suddenly charge down the street. They tear through the crowd, nearly trampling people, while one of them screams for everyone to move. Boris is right in their path. The rider barks at him to get out of the way, unless he wants to die. He freezes for a second. He's a heartbeat away from being run over. The horse rears and kicks at him, but he throws up his arm to shield his head. He still gets knocked to the ground. The man glares down at him and asks if he has a death wish. Then he says Boris should be kneeling and begging for blocking their way, while the others circle him and laugh. Everyone nearby pretends not to see a thing. He apologizes for being in the way, but he also points out that racing horses through a crowded street is their fault. The rider hops down with a whip and mocks him for talking big. One of his friends says they should teach the kid a lesson. The whip goes up, and the man swings without hesitation. It lashes Boris right across the face. After that, they start beating him in the street, warning him this is what happens when he crosses men like them. They keep at it until he can only protect his head. He glances down at Winterer. If only he were strong enough to use his sword, or if only Yevgenin were here. But he knows that won't help. Those thoughts won't save him. Using the sword for support, he pushes himself up. The thugs are shocked when he starts rising again. Boris is set on standing with his own strength now. Yevgenin gave his life for him, and he refuses to lose to cheap punks like these. Then the story cuts back to the young woman arguing with her maid about the dress. She complains that it's ridiculous, there are no dressmakers around, and wonders what nobles here even wear. That's when we're introduced to Rosinus da Belnor, Rose, daughter of Count Ganymede. The maid apologizes, and says she couldn't even find a shop selling ready-made dresses. She adds that there weren't any sewing shops either, just a troubled-looking boy she noticed outside. Her father knocks and asks to come in. Rose tells him to enter. He rushes in with a new dress, and we finally meet Count Ganymede da Belnor. Rose lights up and tells her father he's the best. Ganymede says she should try it on so they can go see the city. He explains that learning how other countries live is part of becoming wiser. She agrees, and soon they head out with guards following behind. Rose asks where he found the dress, while the maid Camilla points out she searched all afternoon and found nothing. Ganymede says he bought one that had already been made for someone else, and Rose asks if nobles here don't wear dresses. He tells her Trevor has no nobles. Then something catches his eye, and he quickly hands Rose off to Hugh for a moment. At once he rides off with several soldiers. As he goes, he shouts for them to stop. The men he's calling out are the same ones beating Boris. He spots him on the ground, still clutching his sword. Some townspeople murmur that someone has finally stepped in and wonder if a fight is about to start. Tanya calls for the blacksmith to hurry over. Before they arrive, Ganymede demands to know what those men think they're doing. They snap back, asking who he is to interfere and telling him to keep walking. Ganymede says, picking on a child is unforgivable, and orders them to leave at once. They mouth off, so he grabs his blade and warns them not to blame anyone but themselves. That only makes them laugh. One of them mocks him, asking if he thinks he's some hero. Ganymede doesn't waste another second. He swings. His strike slams into the other man's sword, knocking it high into the air. It sticks into the ground behind them. Ganymede stares him down and asks if he still wants to continue. That bravado disappears fast. He and the others run off like the cowards they are. Ganymede orders his soldiers to pick Boris up, and says they need a doctor. Tanya tells them there's a pharmacist just a few houses down the alley. Rose and Hugh finally catch up, and Ganymede asks if he frightened her. He assures her it's over, then reminds her that a noble who ignores injustice isn't worthy of the title. He tells her to remember that lesson. Rose looks at Boris, still gripping his sword, but all she says is that she doesn't like someone so filthy. Later, he wakes up in a room he doesn't recognize, and wonders where he is. The flower wallpaper reminds him of his mother's room. Then he starts searching for Winterer and panics, shouting to know where it is. A maid beside him says it's under the bed, and tells him to calm down. He asks where he is, but she tells him to stay still while she treats his wounds, then asks where his home is. Boris says he doesn't have one. She seems surprised, saying he doesn't look like a wanderer. He answers that even if he has a home, he can't return there, so it's the same thing. She laughs and asks if he's some tragic runaway hero. Then she says kids who don't know how comfy home is always talk like that, and reminds him the Count only helped him out of kindness. He shouldn't trouble them more, and should go back home. When he asks what Count she means, she explains it was Count Ganymede da Belnor from Anamarad who saved him. Camilla walks in and asks Nurse Willa if he's awake. Then she leans in and bluntly says he got bullied because he wandered into an inn looking like that. She adds that he's lucky her master happened to pass by. Boris still doesn't know who she is, but she hands him clothes and asks if he can move, since the Count wants him at dinner. A full meal is waiting on the table. Ganymede greets him with a smile and says he's glad to see him awake. For the first time in a while, Boris looks a little hopeful as he watches the Count. He takes his seat. A butler steps forward and sets a dish in front of him. Ganymede says one bite will show him the real taste of Belle Cruz. Even Rose perks up, saying it's a truffle omelet made with the famous truffles from their land. Ganymede tells Boris he must be starving and should dig in. He admits it's been a long time since he's had a real meal like this. He cuts into the omelet and starts eating. After a while, Ganymede says he's happy he likes the food, and decides it's time for a proper introduction. He introduces himself as Count Ganymede of Belle Cruz in southern Anamarad. Then he presents Rose, his only daughter and heir, seated beside him. Boris says it's his turn now. He gives his name as Gaiman, and says that since Ganymede is from another country, he may not know his family, but Ganymede repeats the name, then asks if he's from the Gaiman house of Longart. He's heard they're a famous warrior family in Travice, so he asks if something happened. Boris says his father died, and his uncle is running the family now. Ganymede guesses he and his uncle had different political views, and asks where he plans to go, since home no longer seems possible. He says he doesn't really know yet, but a blacksmith might take him in, so he'll try that first. Ganymede says he could probably become an assistant, then asks if he has ever cared about blacksmithing, or if he'd even like that kind of work. He says he has no idea, but he knows he'll have to work hard and learn to handle it. As Ganymede pours himself a drink, he says he has a proposal. Why not come back to Anamarad with them? Boris is stunned, and Rose immediately asks what he's talking about. She wants to know why he'd invite him, but Ganymede says that's for him to think over. He only made the offer. He is just as confused, and asks why he'd even suggest it. Ganymede says he can explain, though he may wish he hadn't asked. Boris still wants the truth, if he might stay with this man. He wants to know everything. Ganymede agrees, then smiles and says it's because he wants to use him. He thinks that figures. There had to be a reason for all this kindness. Ganymede says he already has everything he needs. He has a beloved daughter, so he doesn't want another child, but for reasons outside his control, he does need one around his age. A long time ago, before Rose was born, he made a bet with an old friend. They promised that if they ever had kids, once those kids turned 10, they'd duel with swords. The loser would owe the winner one wish, anything at all. Then time passed, Rose was born, and Ganymede forgot all about it. But last year, after hearing nothing for ages, he suddenly got news about that old friend. That friend has 2 sons, and luckily the older one is a complete fool. After learning Ganymede had a daughter, the man pushed his younger son through brutal training to turn him into a top swordsman. The whole thing was a setup to marry Rose off to his eldest son. Rose drops her glass in shock. She calls it insane, and asks if he's really serious, because she refuses to marry an idiot. Ganymede tells her to settle down and swears on his honor that he would never allow that. Boris points out that he's not actually Ganymede's son, so there's no reason for him to fight. Ganymede says that's easy to fix. He'll claim he is his adopted son, raised far away and only now brought back. He would be treated just like a real son. If he wins, Ganymede will reward him well and give him the freedom to enjoy his life. If he loses, there'll be no punishment. He'll only have to leave the household. Uneasy, he asks why he chose him. After all, they only met by chance, and Ganymede barely knows anything about him. Ganymede says Boris is clearly a noble son with nowhere left to go. He can find plenty of ordinary boys, but not many who already have proper training and manners, and once they return to Anamurud, he will need to act as his adopted son right away. There won't be time to teach him honor and etiquette from the ground up, and the Jaimin family is known as one of the best, a famous line of swordsmen. Ganymede is sure he inherited that talent too, so he asks if he'll come with them. He gives it real thought because it honestly doesn't sound so bad. If he goes to the blacksmith, he could live a quiet life, hiding who he is, but Anamurud is far away, and going there means new troubles and hard tests. Still, it would take him away from Travox, the land that took his father and brother, and he's lost so much just because he was born there. Deep down, he really does want to leave. As he rides with Rose, Boris thinks this country has been soaked in blood for far too long. His brother's last words push him forward again. Survive. He looks back one final time and decides to go. Their carriages roll out, heading away. He and Rose end up riding together in one of them. Rose says he hardly talks at all, and that makes him pretty boring. Then she asks which of them is older, and Kamiya laughs, saying she has no clue. Rose tells Boris to look at her and points out that they're both 12, so she wants to know which one is younger. She says they have a long trip ahead, so they should be able to talk for a while. But he isn't in the mood. He tells her to think whatever she wants, and if she wants to call herself the older one, that's fine by him. Rose is surprised he gave in that fast. She says that's not the point, and asks for his birthday. Hers is April 8th. Boris says July 12th, and she clicks her tongue, calling him boring again. He can tell she's annoyed, so he shrugs and says fine, then he'll be the older one. Rose doesn't like that either, while Kamiya just enjoys the whole exchange. Rose says she never wanted to be the younger one, and more than that she asks when they suddenly became family. Soon they arrive at the estate, and Rose jumps out of the carriage, calling to her mother that she's back. Her mother is Ivanova. Ivanova reminds her not to run in a dress, and Rose quickly apologizes. Boris realizes he's truly come a long way. No one here should know who he is. Ivanova looks him over and asks if that's the child Ganymede mentioned. Ganymede says yes. Since the trip was long, they'd better go inside and finish the introductions. She agrees, and servants come out to take the luggage, as everyone heads in. Once inside, they sit down in the parlor with tea. Ivanova sets her cup down and says she got his letter ahead of time, so she understands the basics. She tells Boris to be at ease while he's here. Rose happily announces that she's always wanted an older brother, so she's decided to be the younger sister. Ganymede laughs and asks if they've already become that close. Then he tells him that while he's here, he should call Ganymede father and Ivanova mother. He also gives Boris his cover story. He is the youngest son of Elgaden, the fallen lord of Glavansk in western Travox. He became Ganymede's adopted son at age 5 because their families were close, and until now he only received financial support from them. He stayed with his own father because his mother died early. Then his father passed away too, so he came to live at their castle. Ganymede asks if he remembers all that, since some people in the castle already know parts of the story. That includes Hugh the secretary and Willa, who nursed him, along with Camilla the maid and some of the soldiers involved back then. Even so, none of them know the whole truth. Only Ganymede, his wife, and Rose do, so Boris must answer everyone else using that story. Ganymede asks if he understands. He says yes. Even if it's made up, some of it is close to his real life. Ganymede tells the servants to prepare his room and says it should be somewhere not too far from Rose's. Then he decides exactly where the room on the second floor of Moonshine Tower. Ivanova is surprised, but she allows it. Rose is shocked too, since that room is clearly special. Ganymede adds that he'll find him a sword instructor soon. Until then, he should rest and recover from the trip. Tomorrow, Rose should show him around the castle, since it's big enough for him to get lost. Rose says he'll probably need a servant too, and Ganymede laughs, saying she's already acting like she's taking care of her older brother. He'll introduce him to the staff tomorrow so he can choose one then. Boris is caught off guard by how warmly he's being treated already. He can't even remember his own father smiling at him like that. Later, when he enters his room, he leans against the door and slowly slides down. At last, he's alone. Rose will take him to his real room tomorrow, so for now he's staying in a guest room. Even for one night, it's an amazing place, maybe even better than his room back in Travox. Looking out, Boris realizes they've come so far away. He wonders if there's a hill here, like the one where he used to play with Yevgoinin. But that old hill was covered in needlegrass, something that only grows in Travotsy. Here, there are flowers everywhere, and even the people feel warmer. Still, in the end, this isn't home. It's a foreign land, and Boris still feels adrift. The next morning, Rose asks him if he slept well. She explains that the castle has 4 towers, one at each corner. Moonshine Tower is in the south, and that's where his room is. She opens the door and says this is it, and Boris is stunned. The room is packed with things, far more than he expected. He looks around in surprise while Rose stands there, clearly proud of it. Then Kamiya rushes in, calling for Rose and begging forgiveness, because she was so busy she didn't notice she was gone. Rose starts to respond, but sees Kamiya trembling and tells her to forget it. She keeps showing Boris around and tells Kamiya to follow behind them. Kamiya agrees and lets out a relieved sigh. He notes that the servants back in Travice felt more like family, and they were never scared of him. Then Rose opens the bedroom door, and that room is just as impressive. She tells him clothes have already been placed in the wardrobe, and someone will explain which outfits fit which occasions. Other than their parents' room, this is the finest room in the castle. It was supposed to be hers at 15, so she warns him to keep it clean while he's using it. Boris points out that she knows he'll be leaving next year, yet she's still being nice to him. Right now they're acting like close siblings, but next year they'll be strangers again. Later they step outside, and Rose excitedly tells him the sunset looks beautiful from there. Then she takes him to the kitchen, says something smells great, and the cooks just laugh awkwardly. After that she brings him to the dining hall and explains it's so large that they usually eat somewhere else. She tries to think of anywhere they haven't visited yet, and figures the tour is almost done. Kamiya points out they still haven't seen the study, and since Master is out visiting the land, now is a good time to go. Rose agrees, then notices someone already inside. The study turns out to be a huge library, packed with books scattered everywhere. As they step in, Boris says he knows what a study is like. Back home he was never allowed in because his father was always there. It feels strange to miss him, even though that man was always cold and harsh. Maybe it's just because he can't see him anymore. Rose's hands start trembling with anger. She snaps, calling out to Lanzi, demanding to know if he's reading her father's books without permission again. He shuts the book. Rose can't believe he snuck in here just to read. The servant is introduced as Lanzi. Annoyed, Rose knocks the book away and demands to know how he dared. She reminds him to know his place and asks what he thinks he's doing here. Then she presses a finger to his forehead and warns that she'll tell her father and have him thrown out. Boris wonders if a servant really slipped into the study just because the master was away. Lanzi apologizes, keeping his eyes on the floor and admitting his mistake. Still, he notices something different about him. Even caught by Rose, Lanzi stays calm. He acts obedient, but his apology doesn't sound sincere. Rose says she's only letting him off because Boris is here. If it happens again, she'll tell her father. Lanzi accepts it, bows and says his goodbye. Then he walks toward him and passes right by him. He can tell he isn't from here either. In that way they're the same, both foreigners in this land. Later, the servants line up in the main foyer, while he stands with Ganymede. Ganymede announces that he adopted Boris 7 years ago. From now on he will live in the castle, so everyone is to serve him well, just as they always have. Then he tells him to choose a servant. He spots Lanzi off to the side and starts wondering if he should pick him. He knows he has no idea what might happen here, or what mistakes he could make. Having someone close to his age might help smooth things over. A slightly foolish servant would be easier to fool, but for some reason, Boris can't get Lanzi out of his mind. There's something different about him. So he tells Ganymede he wants someone around his age. After thinking it over, Ganymede says the boy at the end is Lanzi and asks if that's who he wants. Boris says yes. Ganymede calls Lanzi forward. Lanzi bows and introduces himself. He tells him to serve him well from now on. His new duty is to attend to him, so he can leave his old tasks behind. Lanzi agrees with another bow. To him he looks obedient at first, but there's still no real respect in his voice. Now Boris gets why Rose reacted like that earlier. Lanzi says he'd like to take him to his room, because there are a few things he needs to explain. They head upstairs. Once they arrive, Lanzi tells Boris to sit. He admits he's thirsty. Lanzi brings him a glass, and he drinks it down. Then he asks what Lanzi wanted to tell him. Lanzi says he should first learn about Master's family. Master patrols the county every 10 days and travels abroad every 2 months. Sometimes he's gone 5 days, sometimes a full month. He visits Celtica most often, along with nearby lands that trade local goods. Boris notes that means he's away from the castle a lot. Lanzi goes on. Master is generous, but he doesn't forgive easily when someone crosses the line. He cares deeply for his people and land, yet he stays strict with Prektel. He says that sounds about right. Next, Lanzi explains that Madame almost always remains at the estate. She rises early, sleeps early, and can take offense over the smallest mistake, so he should be careful with her. He realizes she must be hard to deal with. When Lanzi starts on Rose, he glances aside and only says he probably already knows what kind of person she is. He wonders why he suddenly stops himself. After what happened in the study, Lanzi probably can't speak carelessly about her, and he's clearly good at avoiding trouble. Then Lanzi says Ozivo's birthday is next month, and guests will be coming from all over, even the capital. Relatives from Market Krizane's house will be there too. The celebration lasts 2 days, with a dance in the evening. He asks Boris if he knows how to dance. That sounds strange to him. In Trave, noble houses only thought about wiping each other out, so nobody bothered learning dances. Lanzi can tell he's unfamiliar with it, and offers to teach him if he wants. Boris looks uneasy, though he'll probably accept later. He asks what work Lanzi used to do in the castle, and Lanzi says he served the count. Asked when he joined the household, he says about a year ago. He asks where he was before that, and Lanzi answers, Celtica. He explains that Celtica is Animard's capital, and far from here, so he wonders if Lanzi was sold to this house. Then he asks if his parents are still alive. Lanzi pauses before saying he honestly doesn't know. They were alive when he left, but he has no idea now. Boris realizes that was probably the wrong thing to ask, but says that means Lanzi is alone now. Lanzi corrects him. He has a younger sister, and Ganymede has shown them kindness by letting them live here together. If he allows it, he'd like to go see her. Boris says he wants to come too, which catches Lanzi off guard. Lanzi looks a little nervous and asks if he is a gentleman, which only confuses him. Lanzi says he'll trust that he is, and when they arrive, he calls for his sister. Her name is Lansmay. She turns toward them but never lifts her gaze. She almost looks like a doll. Boris is surprised she won't look up. To him, she looks frail, pale and empty, like a white tulip bud with no strength, almost like a wax figure. In a way, she reminds him of himself. Lanzi tells him to wait by the chair. He walks over to his sister and asks if the view is better now that the weather changed. Then he asks if she saw the bluebird that flew by, saying it was beautiful. Its wings sparkled in the sunlight, and he really wanted her to see them. He keeps talking while Boris waits nearby, and he is surprised to see this side of him. Lanzi shares every good thing from his day with her. Everything beautiful in the world, everything good that happened, even though he usually seems cold and distant. So there are things he finds precious too. Even with all three in the same place, Boris feels like those two are far away, sealed inside a world of their own. Lanzi says she seems to be in a good mood, even though she hasn't said a word. He tells her too much, sun isn't good, and asks if she wants an afternoon nap. Maybe she'll dream of picking flowers again, like before. He has no idea what he's talking about. Lanzi asks once more if she wants to sleep now, and he feels this must be a secret only the two of them share. Then Lanzi lifts her from the chair and places her on the bed, tucks her in, and gently wishes her sweet dreams with a smile. But the moment he turns back, that warmth is gone. His face goes blank again, as he tells Boris it's time to leave. Elsewhere in the estate, Rose says she hates Lanzi. He asks why, and Rose says she can't stand people like that. Lanzi can talk, but chooses not to. Just seeing those empty eyes makes Rose want to flick her forehead hard. Boris says that means she can speak, though she still looks sickly. Rose shrugs and says maybe she's just unbelievably lazy. All she really has is a limp, and she doesn't even know how to leave her room. Rose keeps tearing into her. Camilla awkwardly changes the subject and says it's snack time. She reminds Rose that Rose asked to be told. Rose says she has to go. Today's snack is cream cake. As she leaves, she tells Boris those siblings should be more grateful. Even though the sister does nothing, Lanzi treats her like she's something priceless. Then Rose remembers one more thing. They finally found his sword instructor, and he'll arrive tomorrow morning. The instructor is very skilled, but also pretty strange. Rose wonders if she should learn swordsmanship too. Maybe she'd be gifted at it since she's his daughter. He isn't sure anyone could teach her with that attitude. Sometime later, Boris heads into the forest. After spending several days indoors, his body feels stiff, and he knows sword training will be rough if he starts like this. Then something catches his eye. Something catches his eye near a walnut tree. The nuts look ripe, and he wonders if he should climb up. Then he hesitates, hoping that doesn't break some rule here. Looking around, he remembers how Yevigin used to lift him onto his shoulders so he could grab fruit easily. Suddenly, walnuts start dropping, and Boris jumps. He looks up, trying to see what's there. All he can make out is a shadow. His heart pounds. Could it be a wild beast, or some monster like the one from the lake? More walnuts rain down. Then a man calls out, asking if Boris likes them. The man grins, a sword strapped to his back. He is relieved it's a person, not a monster, and starts to smile. A second later, he laughs at himself for even thinking that. The man tells him to collect the walnuts, while more keep bonking Boris on the head. Then he jumps down, and repeats that he should pick up every last one. He has no idea who this weirdo is. He just showed up and started giving orders. The man says gathering them alone would take all day, but with help it'll go much faster. He asks what he is staring at, and whether there's something on his face, then tells him to get moving. Boris is still confused, but he starts collecting the walnuts anyway. The man warns him not to touch the ones still in their outer shells too carelessly, or he'll get blisters. He remembers Yevigin saying the same thing, and he can't believe he somehow got dragged into walnut picking by this strange guy, who was just about to shake the tree again. After a while, the man says they've probably gathered most of them, so it's time to go. Boris asks where. The man points to the castle. He asks why they're going there, and if he even knows what place that is. The man calls it the second most powerful house. Then he doesn't even seem sure who would say that, though apparently everyone knows it. He is left confused, as the man tries to remember the castle's name. Clumsy and weird, that's Boris's verdict. Since he's heading to the castle and acts like this, he figures he has to be the sword instructor, which means he still doesn't know who he is. Honestly, he likes being treated this casually more than stiff formal manners. If this man really is his teacher, getting close now could help later, so he asks if the walnuts are meant as a gift. The man says you should never visit another house empty-handed. He asks if the owner will even like walnuts, and the man says anyone who openly hates a gift doesn't deserve to own a house. He asks if that means any gift is fine. The man says no, that's rude too, and then keeps rambling in Boris's ear. Eventually, they reach the castle. He tells the guards to inform his father that a guest has arrived. The guards answer at once and head off. He waits for the man's tone to change, sure he'll be shocked once he learns who he is. Instead, the instructor just asks what he's staring at, and laughs. That's when he realizes he knew all along. A servant then tells him he was ordered to take the guest to the reception room, where Ganymede and Miss Rose are waiting. They head to the same room he was in before. The instructor thanks them and says he brought a small gift. He dumps walnuts onto the table, and Rose is startled. Smiling, he calls them the fruit of secrets, saying each one makes you older as you eat it. According to him, if Rose eats 8, she'll wake up as a 20-year-old overnight. Boris can't believe he's tricking her with such an obvious lie when they just picked those walnuts in the woods. He also wonders why the man looks so pleased with himself. Then another thought hits him. How did he know Rose was 12? The man says he can tell at a glance, and that he is 12 too. He agrees, but figures Ganymede must have told him earlier. Rose asks if it's true, and Boris quickly warns her not to touch them bare-handed or she'll get blisters. At last, they learn the instructor's name is Whittler. Ganymede introduces him and Rose, but the man admits Whittler isn't his real name, it's just one he used before. When Ganymede asks for his actual name, he apologizes and says he never shares it. Whenever he moves somewhere new, he changes fake names too. From now on, he wants to be called Instructor Walnut. Ganymede laughs and agrees. Then he thanks him for accepting the job, and asks him to guide his children well. Walnut pauses at children and asks if Rose will train too. Will she also be picking up the walnut? Ganymede says yes, he can think of it as the two of them practicing together. He also asks whether starting today would be alright. Walnut says that's fine, but there's no rush. They should begin tomorrow and use today to get used to each other first. He also makes clear he won't speak formally to the kids during lessons. Ganymede tells him to do whatever he likes, and Walnut thanks him for understanding. Then he stands and tells Boris to show him to his room. He is surprised he chose him instead of a servant. Just then, Lansy brings food from the kitchen, the peeled walnuts. Walnut says they're easier to eat this way. Then he notes that Lansy may be a servant, but he looks like a young master, and asks if he wants to learn swordsmanship too. Lansy says he hasn't been ordered to, and Walnut says that's polite of him, but he's also throwing away his own good luck. Then he adds that the tower's name sounds nice. Boris asks how he knows the tower's name, and Walnut says instructors always know everything. He thinks all this man has done is ask him to tie his hair and ask his servant about learning swordsmanship, nothing about actual training. Then Walnut calls to him, suddenly curious. He asks whether he is from Travix, and he is caught off guard. He starts sweating, and Walnut asks if he isn't. He is only shocked because the mention of Travix matches the background story the Count made up for him. So he steadies himself and says that's exactly right. Walnut laughs, saying he knew it. He adds that he isn't blood related to the little girl from yesterday, that she's the Count's real daughter, and he must be adopted. Then he asks if he wants to know how he figured it out. Boris wonders if the man is just messing with him. Lansy answers that it's because he is the same age as Miss Rose. Walnut praises him for being as sharp as he looks, then asks if he knows how he guessed they're the same age. Before Lansy can answer, Walnut cuts in and says it's because he has a superpower that lets him guess people's ages. Boris isn't buying it for a second. He's sure the Count told him. Then he asks if Walnut knows Lansy age too. Walnut straightens up and says Lansy is also 12, but a few months older than him. He asks what month he was born in. Since he was born in July, it has to be earlier than that. Lansy says February, and he starts wondering how Walnut knew that. He asks if Walnut also knows Rose is younger than him. Because Rose calls him older brother, Boris is sure Walnut will mess this one up. But Walnut just laughs and says nice try. Rose was born 3 months before him. That really surprises him, and he asks how he got it right. Walnut says there's one more thing he should know, and he wonders what now. Walnut tells him he has talent, and could become a great swordsman if he trains well. He asks if he can really see that at a glance, and Walnut asks if he thinks it's impossible because he lied before. He doesn't see what lying has to do with swordsmanship. Walnut asks if he thinks famous swordsmen only swing swords. Some use axes for one thing. But more than that, skill with a weapon isn't enough. He says talent means nothing without sharp instincts and quick thinking. Even someone used to clear roads has to know how to fight where there is no path. Even on flat ground, a fighter should know how to strike from a hill or from the water. Smart people adapt fast, and the best at staying one step ahead are often the best liars, just like Boris was. He points to Rose as an example. She wants to be grown up so badly that his lie worked right away. He starts to keep going, and both Lansy and he turn to him. Walnut yawns and says he's getting tired from talking so much, and he's off to take a nap. With that, he heads to his room. Lansy and Boris can only stare, totally confused. Then the story shifts back to the ruined Geinman household, now left in wreckage. Vlado says summer is over, as he looks out the window and lights the candle on his desk. A man enters the room, and Vlado asks whether they found anything. The man answers yes and calls him master. Vlado remarks that he's being called master awfully fast, saying the one most fit for that title is Tolk, who betrayed Jurkin without hesitation. Vlado says he believes the brat went to Anamurad. Tolk confirms that while they still don't know exactly where he is, they did verify that a young boy carrying a sword with a white sheath left alongside a noble. Vlado Jinaman says he already has Winterer, and Tolk keeps talking. The noble from Anamurad used a fake name, so they still don't know who he is, but they'll find out soon. Vlado Jinaman orders him to track down Boris and the whole Winterbottom line. He adds that Yevnon Jinaman may have the snow guard with him, so Tolk should be careful. Tolk agrees and leaves the room. Vlado Jinaman turns back to the window and starts laughing, asking Jurkin what he thinks. He calls Tolk a faithless butler, someone who betrayed his master without a second thought, and threw him into the swamp. But that day, Vlado escaped the lake with magic. Jurkin is dead, the mansion is his now, and his sister's ghost no longer comes to him in dreams. Even so, a cold feeling still sits in his heart. As a bell rings, he curses, saying he can't get that sound out of his head, and wonders if Jurkin can hear it in the afterlife too. That night, back at Boris's house, he thinks the instructor is really strange. If Lonzi hadn't woken him, the man would still be sleeping in his bed. Lessons will probably start tomorrow, and he needs him to teach him how to fight well enough to protect Rose. Even if this is only a deal with the household, he'll still give it everything he has. That will at least give him a better chance to survive. If he wants to live the way Yevnon Jinaman told him to, he reaches under his bed and drops to the floor, thinking maybe he just missed it. Then he looks under the bed in horror. His sword is gone. Winter has disappeared. Panicked, he rushes into the hall, wondering how this happened. He lost the thing Yevnon Jinaman gave him, and it hasn't even been a month since the burial. Yevnon Jinaman's last words are still clear in his mind, and yet Boris still let his guard down. He starts thinking maybe he's just useless after all. A sword can't vanish on its own, so someone had to take it. The only question is who. It was under his bed all day, which means the thief had to be someone who entered his room today. That leaves Boris, Lonzi, and Walnut. He feels stupid for leaving a man he just met alone in his room. He doesn't know what kind of person Walnut really is, and he has to find him fast. He pounds on Lonzi's door, and Lonzi opens it, asking what he needs. He apologizes for waking him, but says he needs help with something urgent. Lonzi says he's here to serve, and tells him to say it. He says they need to find Instructor Walnut right now. Lonzi agrees, but says Boris can't go out dressed like that. He hands him a cloak and tells him to put it on. Then he notices the weapon in his hand, and tenses a little, but says nothing, and leads the way. They go to Walnut's room, but he's not there. Boris searches the room, and Lonzi asks what he's trying to find. He points out there's nowhere in here to hide anything. He says he's right. Winterer isn't here, which means the instructor must still have it. He asks where Walnut could have gone this late, and whether he already ran. Then he asks if anyone leaving by the castle gate would have to pass the guards. Lonzi says yes. The main gate won't open this late without permission, but the north gate stays open and is always watched. Boris says if it's open, then someone can still get out through it. They hurry through the garden in the moonlight. Lonzi tells him they're almost there. He says that if it comes down to it, he won't hesitate. If he can't even protect the last thing his family left behind, then he has no right to bear their name. But then another thought hits him. What if Walnut already escaped? Or what if he can't stop him? Boris doesn't know what he'll do. Lonzi suddenly calls to him, and when he looks up, he's stunned. Under the moonlight, Walnut is swinging Winterer, slicing through leaves. Boris can hardly believe he's holding the sword. Why would he take it? Even Lonzi is shocked, and he notices the fear on his face. Walnut says he knows this sword, and says it carries a dark past. He admits he's right. This isn't the Winterer he thought he knew, but he can tell this is its real form. It gleams with both beauty and killing intent, like pale moonlight flashing through falling stars. Seeing it now, Boris understands the sword was never made for anything good. Still, even with his own face in its reflection, he wants it back more than ever. Walnut calls to him, saying if he's done staring, they should head back. Then he asks what they're doing out here so late. Boris keeps his eyes on the sword. He says it belongs to him. If Walnut only wanted a quick look, fine, but now he needs to give it back. Walnut says he is the one who lost it, and he snaps back asking if he's really going to pull a finders keepers line. Walnut asks if he can actually take his sword back. Boris says he can't believe what he's hearing. He thought Walnut came as a sword teacher, not a thief. Walnut laughs and says he is bold for a kid. Still, a child shouldn't be carrying a sword. Until a child grows up, a blade only looks for blood. Then he turns serious and asks where he got it. Because this is Winterer, the sword hidden away long ago. He confirms that's exactly what it is. Walnut laughs again and says that means his family must be the Ginemen, the house of Trevakes, that kept the sword out of the world's sight. He asks what that has to do with anything. He says he's Beliner, soon to be Walnut's student, and that's all Walnut needs to know. Walnut pauses, then slides the blade back into its sheath, clearly surprised by his nerve, though he still keeps the sword beside him. Then he says he won't give it back. Boris answers that he'll take it by force. Walnut glares and tells him to try. He says threats won't scare him. He knows he can't win if he attacks, but even if it kills him, he won't let Winterer be stolen. Pulling out his small blade, he says that if Walnut wants to leave quietly, then he'll have to kill him first. Walnut just stares, stunned, as Boris steps forward. Then Walnut bursts out laughing, catching both of them off guard. He says kids like him are hard to find these days. Squatting down, he meets him at eye level, which only makes him more uneasy. Walnut says he isn't going to steal his sword and run, and he would never cut down a child anyway. But since he said that, Walnut wants to make a bet. He wonders what kind, and Walnut says making himself look untrustworthy is his own fault. Still, he promised the Count he'd teach him, and he'll keep doing that until spring next year. Until then, Boris will get one chance every day to take the sword back. If he succeeds, Walnut will never touch it again. But if he fails before Walnut leaves, then Walnut will do whatever it takes, even cut him down to make the sword his. He asks what he thinks of that deal. He says his life doesn't belong to him alone. His brother's life rests on him now, and that burden will never go away. So he has to keep living no matter what, and as a Gineman, he also has to protect Winterer from anyone who tries to take it. So he accepts, and asks what will prove Walnut means it. Walnut offers him a dagger as the sign of their deal. If Boris wins, he should return it. If he fails, Walnut says he'll come take that dagger back himself, because it's important to him. On the blade the words read, "Remember the disaster." He is still shocked by all of this. First one contract, now another. He isn't even sure if he should accept it. Lonzy Rosenkrantz tells him he should. When Boris turns, he sees how serious his face is. Lonzy asks why not agree to it. He hesitates, but then he notices bright light streaking across the sky. At once, something inside him starts to burn. It feels just like when Yevgen Gineman chose the only way to protect his brother. What fills Boris now isn't despair or shame, it's the opposite. Looking at the shooting stars, he feels like he's found a guide, a light in the dark. Walnut asks if that means he agrees. He takes the dagger and slips it into his robe, saying he expects Walnut to keep his word like a true warrior. Walnut replies that he's a warrior, just like his family name says. At that moment, Boris feels like he's found the key to escape this long night. And for the first time, everything around him seems filled with light and hope. Sometime later, at the training grounds, Walnut tosses him a sword, saying it's made for boys and the Count sent it. He catches it and starts to draw it, but Walnut stops him. He asks why. Walnut tells him no one said to draw the sword. For now, they are not using swords at all. He points to the field and says they will start with running. Boris has to circle the castle at a steady pace and keep going until Walnut tells him to stop. Lonzy stays with Walnut and watches him run. Walnut notices his look and asks if something is bothering him. Without looking at him, Lonzy says he hopes the sword gets returned soon. Walnut remarks that he is more loyal than he looks. Lonzy says he gets what Walnut is trying to do, and knows he may see this as part of training, but if he pushes Boris too far, he will start to question his real motive. Walnut asks if that was a threat. Then he says, Lonzy is missing one thing. He is doing this because he does not trust his master's skill. Lonzy answers that it does not matter to him. Every person has to prove their own value. Walnut is taken aback that such a young servant talks like that, then says he understands. Lonzy is simply doing his job. He adds that he wants to watch Boris for himself, so Lonzy can watch too and judge by the results. Lonzy looks up at him and says that choice is his to make, so he should not act like he is granting permission. With that, he says he will bring him some water and walks off. Walnut is left staring after him, wondering why he talks so well. For a servant, he has a lot of nerve, talking about freedom to choose like that. After some time, Boris is still running. He is completely out of breath, and figures he has done around 10 laps. He wonders when Walnut is coming back. Walnut said he would only be gone a little while, yet he is nowhere in sight. For a moment, Boris wonders if this is all a joke. But no, they made a contract, so this must be Walnut's test. He wants to prove he is the one who deserves Winterer. He vows not to quit once he starts something. He will take in every lesson he can if it helps him win, and he refuses to stop, no matter what. Then he suddenly stumbles and crashes to the ground. His will is telling him to survive at all costs, but his body is painfully weak. He cannot believe a little running is making him suffer this much. Still, Boris forces himself up. He tells himself he cannot stay down. He has to get up and run. Even as he crawls, he keeps repeating that he must prove himself to Instructor Walnut, that he can survive no matter what kind of situation he faces. Then he collapses again. His vision starts fading. A splash of water hits him, and his eyes snap open. Lonzy is there, apologizing for dumping water on him. Boris thanks him as he wipes himself off, then glances down at the soaked sword and says he needs to dry that too. He sets it aside and starts running again, thinking Walnut might at least pity him a little when he returns. Walnut suddenly shouts for him to stop and demands to know why he put the sword down. Does Boris think this is just running practice? Did he assume Walnut would only teach things that directly involve swinging a sword? What kind of swordsman could he become with that attitude? Dropping the blade just because it feels heavy. He is shocked, since that was not what he meant at all. but he realizes arguing or making excuses will not help. He still made a mistake. So he apologizes and says it will not happen again, then tells Walnut to punish him. Walnut says he will. First he asks how many laps he finished today, and Lansy answers, 12. Walnut says this will now be Boris's routine every day until he leaves this place. He thanks him. Walnut then turns to Charlotte and asks if they should finish their own training. She glances back at him, and Walnut does too, just in time to see Lansy heading over to him. Walnut wonders what exactly he just did, and why he got angry at Boris for no good reason. A full month passes. Time skip aside, he has moved on from just running, and is now training with the sword for real. Charlotte watches from a distance when Nyatre mentions that rain is coming. Walnut asks if they should go inside and talk instead, but he notices Boris is still out there training. She says Walnut treats him harshly, so she is not even sure he would let him come in. Still, if they stay outside, everyone will get soaked, so Charlotte suggests they bring him in and sit together just for today. Walnut actually thinks it over, which surprises her. Then he agrees, and she happily says she will have snacks prepared too. Once inside, food is set out on the table, and Walnut jokes that eating this much only makes him hungrier. He asks how that could possibly work, since it should be the other way around. Walnut says people know the feeling. After starving, once they finally eat, they get restless and want to devour everything in sight. Charlotte says she has never felt that, and Boris stays quiet. Walnut gives a small smile and says ambition works the same way. Sometimes people already have enough, yet still want more. They keep climbing higher and higher, and he wonders when that hunger ever ends. Then he asks her what she wants most, something so important that once she gets it, she would need nothing else. She says she already has everything, and whenever she wants something new, her father buys it for her. Walnut says he doubts that is really true. There must be something even her father cannot give her. For example, becoming the most beautiful young lady at her coming-of-age ceremony in Celtica Palace. Then she would be flooded with marriage offers and have to choose among them. Charlotte immediately gets flustered, and Walnut turns to Boris and asks what he wants. He says if he answers, he will share his own ambition too. He starts to answer, then pauses to think. At last he says, it is just like he told him before. When he holds the sword, he remembers things he cannot forget. This castle, this quiet land, the kind servants and everyone here who has treated him well. It reminds him that none of what he has now truly belongs to him, and even living among them, he still feels like an outsider. Like a child tossed into enemy lines, someone anyone could hurt if they wanted. So he keeps asking himself what he needs most to survive. He finally reaches an answer, and lowers his gaze. Walnut waits. Boris says he wants the strength to live on his own without needing to ask anyone for help. That answer catches Walnut off guard, and after a short pause, he says he understands. If he wants the power to survive without relying on others, that is at least simpler than Charlotte's wish. And unlike hers, he will not have many rivals. He asks who her rivals are, and Walnut says she must know at least one name, Clo da Pontina, daughter of Duke Vanita. She is about his age, moves in Celtica high society, and many already call her Andromerit's top future bride. He starts shaking in panic. Walnut pushes it further, saying if she does not get rid of Chloe, her dream will never come true. Charlotte cries that it cannot be true, but Boris can tell Walnut is teasing again, so he tells him to stop and get back to what he was saying. Walnut grins and lets out a soft laugh, then asks if either of them knows the strongest knight in Andromerit. They do not, so he says they really know very little. It is Viscount Ganpir, a spearmaster who can also win any battle of words. Then there is Bernard Geoffrey de Orleans, son of the Northern Archduke Orleans. He is not even 20, yet he is already famous, especially after giving his silver skull victory to the Queen of High Hyacinth. He asks what the silver skull is, and Walnut is stunned. He does not know. It is a martial tournament, only for fighters under 20. The winner receives a silver skull, and becomes known across the continent. Still, Walnut says he has never seen anyone from Trevowine win it. Boris says that if a contest like that was famous, Yevgon Jinamin would have entered for sure. Walnut goes on, naming Princess Anifa of Lemmy, Saganer of Komzark, and even the famous mercenary bands from the Union countries as fierce fighters too. The world is huge, he says, so naturally, it is full of strong people. Then he asks what the two of them think. Charlotte says she hopes the warriors of their country are stronger than all the rest. He says those people are just strangers to him. Unless they become his enemies, he does not really care about them. Walnut says that is exactly his problem. Boris never once thought about surpassing them or learning from them, did he? He says nothing. He only asks why he would need to become that strong at all. The room goes quiet as Boris keeps a completely serious face. Walnut says that even after deciding to learn the sword, he still does not dream of becoming the best. For someone training with a blade, he has very little ambition. He replies that he is not likely to meet the strongest people in the world, and even less likely to fight them. It is enough for him to learn the sword well enough to live freely. Walnut laughs and asks if surviving is really his only goal. He says yes, that is what he told him from the start. Walnut asks if he has no desire to survive in a greater, more satisfying way. Boris says he does not know if someone like him can afford to live that way. Walnut asks what he means by afford. Walnut says that means he wants a quiet life, one where he doesn't fight fate or draw its attention. Then he points at him and asks if he has no pride. Doesn't he want to leave what's in his heart behind in this world? He asks if he has never thought that a flower is most beautiful when it blooms at its fullest. Right away, he thinks of his brother, and panic hits him. He starts sweating. He clenches his hand and says once you die, it's over. Looking glorious means nothing. He doesn't want to burn bright for one short moment like his brother did, then vanish. He doesn't want to live only in other people's memories. Pain and fear are all over his face. He says his brother's life ended in that field. What meaning is there in his little brother remembering him? What meaning could that have? Walnut looks at him coldly and asks how many people have died for him. That catches Boris off guard. He says he can't think of anyone. Walnut tells him that's the problem. He's trying to carry too many dead lives at once. First, even if he lives quietly, he's not immortal. He can't keep living for the dead forever. No matter how careful he is, he can never live in their place. Second, as long as he's alive, he can't erase his own desires. Walnut gives an example. If Boris gets hungry, should he eat whatever he sees, even food off the floor or someone else's scraps? Is he really going to crush his hunger and walk away from the table, just staring at the food? How long can he live like that? Can that even be called living? The moment a person stops wanting anything, they're already dead. Can he really reach his goal with a soul that empty? Walnut calls it a starved, withered soul. He answers that even if he grows strong and kills every great warrior, what would change? The dead still wouldn't come back. Walnut stares at him and clicks his tongue, admitting Boris has a point. But he's wrong too. Building your whole life around the dead and calling that living is absurd. Walnut asks if he really has nothing he wants for himself, no wish to live fully and feed those starved ambitions. He says he can honor the dead by living better, not just by dragging out his life. Boris says there was a time he wanted that more than anything. He wanted his family safe, and he wanted his brother to live, but he's tired of wanting things that never happen. A long time ago, he lost interest in everything except surviving. His brother once told him to test every path his life could take and stay alive, so that's what he'll do. He won't give in easily. He'll live a long time, no matter what it costs. Still, if he does live that long, maybe it should mean something. Just surviving by itself starts to feel empty. Rose cuts in, asking why they keep calling him poor. He lives well in their house and wants for nothing. He won't go hungry there either. Walnut laughs and says that's fair. Then he asks Boris what he'll do. Will he skip tonight's training just because of the weather? Rose asks if he really wants to train in this storm, and Walnut says they can quit for today if they want. He gets up and says he doesn't mind going out. He follows Walnut. Rose tells them they can always do it another time if they're tired. Camilla agrees, but Lonzi stays quiet. They head out into the rain, and Lonzi stays under the tent to watch Boris and Walnut train. Walnut jokes that they've got perfect weather, and asks if he is ready. Same rule as always, 1 hour. If he can't take back the sword in that time, training is over for the day. Boris draws his blade and says he'll take it back today, he has to. That sword is his, and he needs it. He braces himself and rushes in. He charges with the sword low at his side. Walnut reads his footwork and timing, then blocks easily with the wooden stick. Boris strains against him, while Walnut barely feels pressured. They lock up for a moment, both weapons shaking, and Walnut tells him to try again. A light tap sends Boris backward. He catches his balance and notices his hand has gone numb. He realizes this won't be enough. He has to get stronger, so he grips the sword harder and swings again and again, telling himself he needs to become strong enough that no one after Walnut can ever take from him again. Everyone wants this blade, so if he means to keep it, he has to grow stronger. And if he keeps doing that, maybe one day people will stop watching him and stop getting in his way. Then even if the strong carve up the whole continent, he might still find one cave where he can rest, a place where no one can threaten him, where he can finally cry in peace. That thought only makes him more frustrated because right now his heart is trapped somewhere his tears can't reach. He lifts his sword again. This time there's something different in his eyes, real ambition. He charges, shouting that he's coming, and unleashes a rapid flurry. Walnut blocks one strike after another. Boris keeps pressing, and Walnut starts to smile. Now that's better. He's finally getting faster. He grits his teeth and keeps going, while Lonzi watches from a distance. Eventually Boris crashes to the ground, but he gets right back up. He's set on getting stronger. Lonzi keeps watching, quietly impressed by his dedication. Walnut tells him he has one last chance today. This time, Walnut attacks first, and Boris blocks. Walnut tells him to do better, then swings again. The stick grazes his face and cuts him. The sight of blood stirs something inside him. He pauses for a second, then realizes he has to take the sword back no matter what. His eyes turn sharp, and he grinds his teeth. He raises the sword over his head and leaps. Walnut is surprised. Boris's eyes are full of desperation. The rain comes down even harder, beating across his blade as he dives at Walnut. Boris lets out a yell, and Walnut realizes this is it. He finally found what he was missing. He laughs, tightens his grip on the stick, and meets the attack head on. His sword bites slightly into the wood, and Walnut looks pleased. Good. Boris is startled too, and jumps back to make space. They face each other in silence. He pants from exhaustion but smiles. He finally made progress. Walnut smiles too, then catches Boris dropping his guard, and knocks the sword from his hand. He stumbles, turning toward the blade as it flies away. When it hits the ground, frustration surges through him. He says he's never let go of his sword before, and he won't let it happen again. Not since Winter was taken from him. He never dropped it when he lost or when he fell, so why would he let go now? Walnut calls him pathetic and drops Winter to the ground, then hauls Boris up by the arms, lifting him as he laughs and calls him pathetic again. Then he pulls him into a tight hug and says he still hasn't seen all the things this world has for him, calling him a brat. Why does he keep trying so hard to hold himself back? Everyone in this world struggles. Even so, they still deserve to live and hope for a great life. They choose to live without hiding what they want. Boris looks up and something in him starts to answer those words, while Walnut holds him close. He says he has a home he can never go back to, and an uncle who led a revolt. He lost his father, and Tolk too, though he still doesn't know Tolk is alive. There was even a real evil spirit in the lake, and worst of all, he lost his brother, the person who meant everything to him. Walnut starts repeating the same kind of words. Yevgenin once said, he has to keep living and fight through this cruel world with everything he has. At that he finally breaks. Walnut tells him people don't live just for the sake of not dying. They live each moment for tomorrow, and he bursts into tears. Clinging to Walnut, he cries while Lanzi watches. Then Walnut finally sets him back down. He glances toward his sister's room, and tells Boris this is only the beginning. He's still an outsider here, and many eyes are on him. What choice will he make? Where will he go? And what kind of life will he choose? All to survive. And now, at last, he has his sword back. If you made it to the end, drop King in the comments. Subscribe for more, and leave a like or comment to support this YouTube channel.